Perfect.
Welcome to Warcraft Reloaded, a podcast brought to you by Mash Those Buttons, covering World of Warcraft Classic and its community. I am Bobby, also known as Blazin' Bob, and today we're joined by first-time caller, long-time listener, and sometimes part-time host, Duranosaur. How you doing?
Yo, I am good. Happy as always to be here. So appreciate you, Bob. You're looking great today, by the way.
Thank you. Yeah, that intro is the one that you gave yourself when you called in when Cargos was on the other day. It cracked me up pretty hard, so I thought I would use it here.
Oh, yeah. Anyone who doesn't know, Bob does pitch it, I think, every episode. But you can call in to a 1-800 number and leave any voicemail you want. And there's a good chance he'll just play it on the show. So take advantage of that whenever you can.
We actually, I'll be getting to that, but we have a way for people overseas now to send in too. But we'll get to that shortly. First off, first time on the show, you might know him from Countdown to Classic. You might know him from Vanilla, dumpstering people on his mage. We have North The Mage. How you doing, sir?
I'm doing well. Thanks for having me on.
Welcome to the show. All right. I'd like to start off the show by thanking our tank patrons and Thick Lizzie and Croxford. I'd also like to remind everyone that we stream live on Twitch at twitch.tv/BlazinBob. That's BLAZZIN _ or no underscore, just BOB. Sorry about that. And then I want to remind everybody, if you're looking for a guide for classic or even retail, you can go to restedxp.com and use code RELOADED. See, I'm already screwing up.
Oh, you're great, Bob.
All right, so we're going to start off. We're going to go, I'm going to read a review real quick. Then we're going to go over a couple listener voicemails that were sent in. Then we're going to go into what we've been doing as of late in WoW. And we're also going to talk about the news. And then at the end, as long as we don't get crazy talking too much about the news, we are going to do the first time interview with North The Mage. So strap in and let's go. And I'm going to try and read this review. This is from iTunes, from Twist of Fate 27, 5-star review. He says, or she says, 5 stars just isn't enough. Hey there, Bob and Mel. Cast it yourself here. Been meaning to drop a review and finally got the time to do so. I can't express enough how great the content is. Definitely helps me get through the workday for sure. Question for you. So we hear and see many content creators flow through your show. Have you thought of bringing in randoms that leave voicemails and emails, or maybe even reviews? Just a thought. Again, thanks for the show. You have also inspired me to get into pods myself. Keep an eye out for it. Leveling a mage on Benediction soon. Yes, it's on Alliance side, while my main is Horde on Mankrik. Well, I hope it's on Alliance side if you're going to Benediction. But thank you so much for the review. As for your question, we've had a few listeners on. They usually write in with an idea of something to talk about, something that they know a lot about, similar to what Josh does on Countdown to Classic. He does it all the time, though. I don't do it as much. It's a lot safer to bring on content creators that have a public-facing face. You kind of know what you're going to get, at least a little bit. Whereas it can be really scary bringing on someone you don't know at all. So usually I've had an interview process for listeners that do come on. And so, yeah, if you have an idea about a a topic that you want to talk about and you want to write me up something and send me a message, feel free to do so.
Yeah, Bob put me through like a full-on background check for my first time coming on the show.
Which begs the question: How did I meet this vetting process?
Yeah, how did North get through?
I feel like I am the loose cannon here, right? Like where's the attention to safety? Okay, I feel as if my presence makes things unsafe, right?
No. I think maybe North 2 years ago, maybe. But North now, I think North's good.
I've moved away from calling people dipshits all the time. So now I'm boring, unlucky.
All right. Well, thank you so much for your review. All right, guys, I got a couple voicemails. I'm gonna throw them up here and let you guys. You should be able to hear them. So here's the first one.
Hey, Mel. Hey, Bob. This is Zim. I play pretty much exclusively now on Sky Fury as a Frost Death Knight. I also have a Prot Warrior. Jumped on the fresh train right out of as soon as it was announced. It's all about it. My entire guild moved from Whitemane and started anew on Sky Fury. And now we're, in the race for all the world first, speed runs, all that stuff on Sky Fury with our Horde counterparts. I'm traveling across country right now for Christmas, and so sorry for the audio. No, it's a bit weird coming from the car. But I was just listening to episode 131 of the pod, Joyous Journey Returns, and as soon as they said something about why don't you reach out to somebody who plays on a fresh server, it's like, oh, well, yeah, I do that, and I've been on, Countdown to Classic a few times, but regarding whether or not boosting or the character boost should come to fresh servers. I know there's a few folks in my guild that would love it, and the grind of 1 to 80 for Wrath is a bit extensive, but I think the addition of Joyous Journeys just to the server alone is to the game alone is huge. Like, I'm leveling a Warlock now as my third 80, and it's just so much smoother, and it just feels way more relaxed, and I totally just for having Joyous Journeys. If that was just on fresh servers all the time, that'd be great. But I don't know how I feel about just an immediate character boost, because I feel like that kind of takes away from the game a little bit. And then, that kind of goes into monetizing the game, play to win, all that jazz. But I know y'all have talked about that several times before. But yeah, I just wanted to call in and tell y'all my thoughts. And thank y'all again for everything.
Oh, kind of cut him off there at the end, but yeah, it's something Duranosaur and I talked about not too long ago. Somebody in one of our Discords asked Blizzard if they would, put the boost on fresh servers, and me and Duranosaur immediately said no. And then we thought about it. We're like, wait, well, we haven't talked to anybody for months now. Maybe the thought has changed, but what do you guys think about the boost first, and then we can talk about Joyous? North?
I was going to let North go. No, so it's good to hear his opinion on it, because I've talked to a couple people who played on Sky Fury, and the general consensus from them, this was pre-Joyous Journeys though. So with Joyous Journeys out, I know that people may have shifted their opinions a bit, because I know it's a lot faster now. But pre-Joyous Journeys, I talked to people who said that one of the reasons they weren't, leveling a second, third, fourth alt and playing more Wrath of Lich King was because having to start at level 1 was just such a time sink to get them up and running. So and even then, some of those people are no longer on the fresh servers, they transferred off. So now it'd be interesting to know now if they are taking advantage of the boosts, or if they're playing any more than they were before they transferred and stuff like that. So it's I think it's still an interesting topic. I think the whole landscape of those fresh servers right now is interesting, because I think a lot of people are leaving them because they're slowly dying, and it's tough to know whether they're slowly dying because the players are just leaving, or if players are quitting, or whatever it is.
Yeah.
I think it's simultaneously. I think it's both problems, right? You have these nexuses of players that are the only like unlocked bastions, right? And denying them the boost, I think, is actually a problem because you have this issue, right? You had it before Joyous Journeys, especially Joyous Journeys going away. But this would have to have been solved maybe like a month ago honestly at the latest.
Yeah.
Is that the boost should have been introduced then, and then you have more of an opportunity for, if they're going to keep these servers locked, you need to create opportunities for these servers to flourish. And yes, okay, it's fresh, okay, you don't want the boost, et cetera, great. But if you just let that server die, why are we, right? Like what ideal is worth letting the entire server collapse over? Because then you're just going to let them go on other servers where boosts are allowed anyway, right? So nothing is really solved by that. I think that Blizzard should have been a little more proactive in that. I think that they are looking at like server management and the state of how things are. And I think that they have maybe accepted that things are going to kind of migrate, but they haven't allowed, to my knowledge, they haven't allowed free transfers from all these lesser realms to like large realms. And I think that there is one good reason for that, and that's they don't want to make Aranicus, which is currently like the only server that you can transfer to. They don't want to have to put in a situation where it's locked and then there actually is no place for these people to go that has any kind of large population. So yeah, I don't know. It's tricky. I think that they for sure should have done it. I think that by now it's a little too late. It doesn't really solve anything. It doesn't really hurt anything either, though. You know, like maybe it could recover. But especially if you're removing Joyous Journeys, which they are in I believe 7 days, I don't think much is going to change. Right. I think that those servers will peter out as they do. We might get one other bigger server out of this, whole sort of mix up in the form of Aranicus. I think that'll be a good thing, but then they'll have to reassess what the lock situation looks like and, everything sort of adjacent to it.
Yeah, I think that's the perfect point. I think you hit the nail on the head. In my opinion, they needed to do this a lot earlier and they needed to give the boost earlier. And it's really funny because it just reminds me how tough of a job they have. Because even me, who's like in Classic, right? I didn't play Fresh, so I didn't even think about it, right? Like I just knew that nobody wanted it from the start, and of course you wouldn't. But then I never went back and thought about it ever again. So these guys, I mean, it just kind of gives me a little bit of empathy for them with like everything they have to track, because I just didn't even think about it. And if I didn't, then like, yeah, it's just rough. But what are you
managing
do?
The game of the size that they do with the size of the team that they have? Obviously, they're trying to expand it, which is dope. I support that. I think that's a really great effort. And I do wish that they would be like, they're a lot more communicative now than I think that they ever were, which is really great. Like you see Aggron and I love Aggron. Aggron is, my favorite Aggron easily. And he is making this very concerted effort that I think a lot of people are really seeing and really appreciating in the form of he's communicating all these things very actively. He is really killing it. And I love to see that. And I love to, you can feel the passion through him. And you have all these stories of people. I don't know, when I was introduced to Aggron, they were like, oh yeah, well, he's a producer on the game. He sits in our Discord while we're testing Nax and saw him. And I was like, what? And he was like, yeah, no, he just sits in the Discord. He just talks to us. And I was like, that's so lovely. That's amazing. I adore that kind. Like he lives and breathes it, right? I would want them to be a little more, and I'm sure they're leading up to this. Obviously, there's a lot to do, and I don't expect it all to happen at the same time. And obviously, they're likely sitting and thinking and discussing, and they want to come out with something before. I'm sure it's on their mind. I'm sure they're actively discussing it. I'm sure they have been, and maybe there's a really good reason why they haven't pulled the trigger. In the same way that there's a lot of reasons of things that they do that I don't fully understand, and then they talk about it, like with the Gargoyle thing, where I wasn't fully sure that it was A, necessary, or B, about the approach they were going to take until it was explained to me. And then I was like, oh, wait, this is brilliant. This specific nerf, because I had recommended a different change that would have completely gutted the class. I didn't even realize because I wasn't super familiar with it, but then you realize how familiar they are. So I'm sure they're talking about it. I'm sure they're concerned with it. And I hope they find a good solution soon, because I think that ultimately that is the only thing in the way. They haven't found a thing that they want to do yet. At least I hope. So.
Yeah. I think like with so many of the different things that happen with Classic WoW, there's almost never like a single answer to any question because so much of it changes, right? Like these fresh servers are a great example, and like the current state of servers with so many of them being locked to transfers and even new character creation, like those things were done at a time for a purpose, and then over a certain period of time you start to question, like, why are they still in those states, right? Like why were gargoyles allowed to be just like the best thing in the game for so long, and now they're changing it? Why did we lock all these big mega servers? Well, it made sense because there were, the queues, and there was just too many people, and it was actually bringing the servers down. It was crashing the auction houses, all these things. But now that those aren't like issues that we're facing every day, do they still need to be locked? And it's just like this ongoing. Not going to
face them, right? Like so then you have to give and take. It's like we haven't seen it in a while, and so it's it's the we get a little bit biased against it. We're like, well, I haven't seen a queue in X amount of time, and so the queues aren't there, and they're not. But the second that Ulduar launches, what's going to happen? Is there going to be a queue on the rip? Is there going to be 14,000 queue on Benediction? Of course there will be, right? And maybe that only lasts for a few days, and so it's not a big problem. But then when Cataclysm launches, if they choose to do Cataclysm, right? Like, is that not going to be a shit show at the beginning? Maybe
so there's
than Wrath, but to what extent, right? And so they're always juggling that, and so it's really hard. And for like the Death Knight thing, people are like, oh well, it should have been done way earlier. Some people are saying, and some people are saying it shouldn't have been done at all. But realistically, what kind of time frame would you expect? It kind of would be okay. Well, when people sort out the weird meta stuff that they develop, when they sort out, okay, we've nerfed the meta gem swapping, we've nerfed the the weak auras that just swap your weapons for you. They've really they were constantly looking at it, and they were constantly hammering away at fixing the things that might have made it an outlier and could have brought it in line without any balance changes, with just bug fixes. And then ultimately at the end of the content patch, prior to it coming into a new tier and tainting the new tier, and then they have to leave it alone for the whole thing, or else it feels especially awful, they say, listen, we have to stop this before it goes too far. This is as far as this goes. We've tried, and it hasn't come where we want it to. We think it's going to be more of a problem. The hammer will come down. And I think that's the right decision. It's the only real decision to be made. And so it feels bad for people. And I think that, like, if you speak with the people who made these changes, that'd be Chris, who worked, I believe, originally on Wrath, actually made this, was the one who made this change. And Aggron communicating it, he makes jokes here and there, but it does feel bad. No one wants to, right? Like, and I was talking with my friend about this. I don't think there's a developer that wants to nerf things ever, because you've given that power to them. And I'm not a professional developer with however many years of experience, so maybe I don't know, and maybe I'm talking on my ass. But when you've given someone that power, you think it's fun, you think it's cool, you think it's appropriate. And if it gets misused or it becomes clear because of the interaction with other systems that it's ultimately a bad thing, you're still going to pain being like, okay, well, now I have to take this away from you. And all you're going to remember is that I took it away from you. You're not going to remember all the other cool things that you have. You're going to remember what I took away. And that feels awful, I think. So I don't. Yeah. The people who, think as if the devs are dancing on their graves and, like really, reveling in this. I think that is, I understand why they're frustrated and why they're angry. They love the game. They will like to play it. They found a cool thing to do. But I think trying to be empathetic to the people who clearly are on the same side as you ultimately is probably the way to go.
And I think that's like.
Oh, sorry, go ahead.
I was just gonna say, I think that's why they also stick so firmly to, like, hey, we're gonna give you guys like the final patch, and we're gonna try to deviate from that as little as possible. Like, why? There's a good reason why one of the reasons why they probably haven't buffed Rets is because they know if we buff them now, they will be too powerful later. And we don't want to take that back away, right? Why they didn't give us like the super overpowered DKs that we got at the beginning of Wrath was because, again, like, we don't want to take that away. They wanted it to be like just this smooth experience. And it's super tough getting through those like rough patches because players are going to rant and rave.
And I think someone gave me this example, and we're talking about League of Legends. I think for competitive balancing, especially when you introduce to new things, I think that might be, because I'm realizing there might be a problem with my idea. I think when you introduce a new thing, like a new class, I think there actually is some merit to nerfing it, right? Like to developing it, like giving it too much.
Make it too good. Yeah,
and then pull it back, because then people, right? Like, I think the thing that you especially see in League, the reason why they say that I think that they love this is because people then commit time to getting good at it, right? And so then they figure it out. They figure out why it's broken. They figure out what interactions are truly heinous. And then you have people interested in the character already because they put this time into it. They've been invested in it. It's cool. And if you nerf it in a way where it's still cool, but it's not ridiculous, you've now gotten people to exit, okay, I'm a mage, and a Death Knight comes out, they're like, well, I don't want to play Death Knight because it's not, like I know what I know, and I'm not, you have to give them a reason to step outside of that comfort zone, I think. And so I think that maybe in that way, that's just an area where I might not be as sort of long-sighted on why nerfs could actually be a good thing sometimes.
Well, that's what Zyrene says that constantly from his time with League of Legends, how they, come out overpowered, people put the time in and then they stay in, But we are definitely going to talk about the DK change, but later on in the news, though. What do you guys think about joyous journeys for life?
For like the rest of Wrath, you mean?
Yeah, because that's kind of what he was asking.
I mean, I genuinely don't think that there's a large community of players in Wrath of Lich King that are seeking that like normal experience leveling rate, right? Like I don't think that that's like a normal thing where people, I don't know. And if you are upset about it, you can turn it off anyway, right? So yeah, I don't know why it would be a negative thing.
Yeah, I don't see it as being a negative thing. I guess like you get these sort of discrete, it feels better to have like discrete increases maybe. I don't know. I don't see a real reason not to have it longer. Because I think that especially when Ulduar's out, like I would at the bare minimum, right? Like, okay, like TOGC, bad rap. Okay, TOGC has a bad rap. So if you get people to start leveling when TOGC comes out, maybe it's they have more time to do other stuff so they can level more alts. That's cool. I don't know. But
yeah, Arcos is Arcos is bringing up a good point in chat. Is that they're gonna just keep putting Joyous Journeys in for the last 4 weeks of each phase to get people who maybe are burnt out at the end of the phase that, okay, well maybe I'll come back and level a new character for the next phase.
Discrete event, right? Like it's a whole thing. It feels good because it's like, oh, well now's the perfect time because look, the event's up. Even if that is the exact same, if the event's always up, they're gonna feel like it's fortuitous, right? Yeah, no, I feel that.
I think you might be muted, Bob.
Yeah, and it's kind of just like an exciting thing for people. I think it is good that it comes in at the end of a phase just to save me from myself, if that makes sense. Like I took a long break, this last couple weeks, and I played PlayStation 5 and other games, and I hadn't played another game besides WoW for months, and it was really good, and so to save people like me from myself, like what do I do? I would work up all of the classes and then just be like, I'm burnt out. I don't think I want to do Trial of the Champion. I'm gonna quit the podcast. It's just it's kind of like snowballs. So I like it coming at different times, but I wouldn't mind them doing Joyous Journeys forever now, and then we get double Joyous Journeys at certain times.
Yeah,
I think that a game that does this really well, and people are going to hate that I am using this as a reference, but I think a game that does this really well is Genshin Impact, which is really weird to say, but they constantly have events rolling, right? And so they constantly have things that bring you back, right? Like if you stop playing the game for a couple weeks, like it'll give you an event that gives you additional stuff when you come back, and they always have new events and stuff. And so there's a bit of FOMO, and I dislike that there's a bit of FOMO. I think that's kind of built into a lot of online games anyway, but and it's hard to avoid. But there's a lot of there are these lull periods as well. So they have these events, but then there are also these downtime periods where there's a couple of weeks out of every patch, and usually patches about every 5 weeks. So there's usually 1 or 2 weeks where if you want to play the game pretty a lot, like you don't feel like you have to log in for a couple of weeks out of every patch, which is really nice to have this. Okay, there are these moments of breath, and then they're really trying hard to make cool content for you to engage with, but it doesn't need to be all the time, which I think is really cool. And I think it's really nice. Ghostcrawler talks about that a lot with with the Ride MMO and all the stuff that he says. He's like, listen, we want a game where people, you know, where when we have good content and we want to produce it often, that people are coming to it, but we don't want to feel like you have to, we don't want to force you to feel like you have to log in every day. We feel like that's toxic. And I really like having the, you know, maybe having it on kind of creates that vibe for some people where it's like, oh, well, I need to be leveling. I need to be leveling. I need to be leveling. Whereas that you have these like discrete sort of events, I think it's a little more, I think it's more manageable, right?
Yeah. It's super interesting, like following Ghostcrawler and his like, because he does a lot of these like conversations on Twitter and stuff, just asking general thoughts on MMOs and gaming in general. And I so often I'll be thinking about his question, reading the responses, and think about like, okay, like how did vanilla WoW do this? Because like even these days, like Bob talked about, he's been playing other games. He's been playing like PlayStation and stuff like that. I've been playing hardcore WoW. I've been playing vanilla World of Warcraft in my free time and while I'm raid logging in Wrath. And there's just something about it that makes me just want to come back and even just like level hardcore. Yeah.
But would you do it without hardcore?
If I had people who wanted to raid, yeah. I did all of Season of Mastery.
You did,
like, I was like one of those, I was one of few people who actually like raided throughout until the very end.
The few, the proud, the crazy.
So yeah, it's, I don't know. I feel like the farther we get into Wrath, and like as WoW progresses, right, as WoW Classic progresses, and you look at retail and stuff, it does feel like it's they try to come up with ways to get people to like stick around, versus like like vanilla as like a game. I feel like there's so much to do all the time that you don't necessarily need. They don't need to come up with those things. I don't know. So,
well, I mean, I've been doing. I don't know if I don't think I'm the only crazy person, because it seems like about a fourth of my guild like looks for achievements. But like,
oh yeah,
I don't have to do them, but I do them because I don't have to do them. And you know, it's just like, oh, I'm going to do this today. You know, and it's just like a little goal you set. You know, and you do, and it's way better than standing around in Ironforge. You know. But
oh, for sure, yeah.
All right, well, let's go ahead and move on to the next voicemail. And here we go.
Hey, this is Mark, just calling in with a voicemail about you guys talking about whether Kata should be considered the last expansion for Classic WoW, and there's just a lot of good points that you guys made. And I just remember, I'm like Bob, where I quit from vanilla into Kata, and I quit at Kata. But that's not why I don't think it should continue as a new expansion. I think it shouldn't continue as a new expansion because I just remembered very definitively how they changed every single quest, most zones got changed, some drastically, and just totally took what was the classic landscape, whether that was the physical zones or all the quests that were a part of classic WoW, and they revamped them. It was literally a transition into this new retail era that we're in, was getting rid of all of what made classic, literally, and going into the new era. So from that argument, you could make that it was not even designed to be a part of classic. It was designed as a game to be something new, transformative, and get to undo what was classic. So they could do the analysis all they want on who or what would play it, but at the end of the day, Kata WoW is no longer classic, and that's in their words, basically, not mine. So hope that adds something to the conversation. You all were there when it came out, and I'm sure you remember that very clearly.
All right, now, so any listener that's curious what he's referred to, I think we've talked a little bit about it, spotty, in some episodes, but back in September, episode 118, me, Willie, and Scotty J and Mel talked about if we want Kata. And I think that's what he's talking about, because we talked the entire episode pretty much about it. And so, yeah, I mean, that's a good point. Like, is it really classic after you destroy the world and tear it down and everything changes? So I don't know. What do you guys think? I've talked about this ad nauseum, so I don't think I need to actually give my full opinion.
Well, it's interesting, based on the surveys that all got leaked, how much they might be open to trying to maybe not wreck the world, right? Like literally not have the world be torn asunder and try to go through the expansion with the old world intact, as well as like all the other changes that they asked people about in those surveys. So I think I didn't play Kata. I don't know a lot of it. I've only heard people talking about, that's like the first expansion. I think they got rid of the old school talent trees.
They shrunk
altered them. They
shrunk them.
They pruned them, and they did one important change that people were angry about, and that was that you have to finish talent tree before you go into another talent tree. So this nonsense where you don't take the end talent, you have to take the end talent. It becomes mandatory to take the end talent. Until you go into another one. So like multi specs are no longer a thing. So like the idea of like a blast wave mage from vanilla is no longer viable. It doesn't really matter though. It's like a balancing thing because there were a lot of strong talents. Strong talents at the beginning of tiers. And so in order to gate that, they were like, okay, you can take these, but you can't just take all the strong ones from all three, right? Like that would be fried.
So it was a design flaw in my opinion that they did it like that. They should have just had the strong stuff at the bottom, and then people could have messed around, like having that gate really just made every build cookie cutter.
Well, I think what it did was that I think that you have some opportunities where it's not actually all that cookie cutter. We haven't really explored it all that much, I don't think. Because not a lot of people look at Kata. Kata is actually very interesting in that, but most of what it boils down to anyway, when you have these specs, like for instance on my Fire Mage, say, or my Arcane Mage, I actually do get to choose a lot on Arcane Mage. It's really interesting, and taking or not taking Arcane Barrage is actually a very interesting Taurus and Wrath right now, because on certain fights, like on General Vzax on hard mode, you really want Arcane Barrage because you don't want to be spending any mana. And so that helps you reset your stacks without just standing there and doing nothing. So it keeps your throughput high, it keeps your mana usage low. And it's a really interesting talent. You don't want Incanter's Flow because Incanter's Flow is not useful at all on that fight. And so you want Barrage, you want more regen talents, you want other sort of avenues of approach. And that's really interesting. But ultimately, it's not that many things that are different. It's really not that different. Fire, it's like, okay, do you want to take a little more damage? Or do you want to take some range? The choices aren't that interesting. It ends up being cookie cutter almost always anyway. And they were like, okay, well, if it's going to end up being cookie cutter, we're going to give them talents that feel cool and don't feel like, okay, well, this entire tier is completely useless, and I'm just taking it to get to Icy Veins, right? And they eliminate that to make it feel a little more impactful. I don't think it's necessarily better. I do like the Wrath trees more, but they were under this impression, and I think that a lot of developers do this. And I don't know the answer to this because I'm not, I ain't built like that, but. How do you add something and keep adding to it without pruning? And then when you prune, how can you handle that super effectively when you want to create good concentrated talents of power without, making people feel like shit? I think the answer is you just don't gate people in that way. Let them do the weird fucking build with all three. And if it's terrible for the game, fix it. Right. But I think the answer is allowing more player creativity. I don't think it is restricting them ultimately. So I do think that was a mistake as well. I'm like thinking through it right now. That's why I'm like flip-flopping on it. But yeah, I do think that it is a bad design choice. But does that mean that Kata is fundamentally different? Do 90% of the player interactions that occur for the people who regularly play World of Warcraft, do they occur in the old world? No, not in Wrath.
Non-Wrath, already.
No, you sit in the fucking auction house in Dalaran because everyone's a fucking engineer. Smile, and you never leave except for to go for raid for the vast majority of people, or to PvP. Maybe you go do some dungeons. Where you do dungeons, you do them in Wrath. You do them in Northrend, right? You could do a dungeon in the major city too. You can do one in Dalaran. It's great.
Well, I will comment you on that though, because Stormwind is still popping. So is Ironforge. It's just all level 1 bank alts. Because I can't,
Why is your bank alt not in Dalaran?
Because it's laggy as fuck.
Because you don't
laggy as hell.
Maxed out engineering.
But level your bank alt. Stop being lazy. Level that fucking bank alt. Get that fucker to 80.
I think So I think the whole thing with Kata and I think that so many guilds, individuals, what have you, are having these like debates right now about like, would we even play Kata if it came out? How, like, is it still classic? Is it not still classic? We have no idea what they're going to do with Kata. That's like a big old question mark because they they haven't given us any info on it. They haven't even necessarily confirmed that they're going to do it.
And I'll make a really big, bold statement here. In Classic, guilds are way closer to each other, like as people individually than they were back in the day. Back in the day, if you had a really good guild, you had a website with a forum where you talked, and you talked in Ventrilo when you raided. But now with Discord, I mean, we're really friends with people in our guild. Whereas before, I would argue that like these people I could take or leave. And I would say they felt the same about me or anybody else in the guild. I talked to one person that I raided with back in the day that wasn't a in-person friend. I don't want to say in real life friend, because I really feel that it doesn't matter if I've touched you. You're still a real friend if you are. But
well, I'm glad I touched you, Bob.
We're a lot closer now. So I think the draw of people being drawn in because of that is a lot larger than it was in our original Kata. I don't know. I could be wrong.
So that might, what you're saying is that might convince a lot of guilds and groups to play through Kata.
It's gotten me pretty much thinking about, I'm going to do it, and I had no plans to do it ever throughout the whole thing.
What's the reason, right? So people even say, well, is it really not classic because the world that we level through for 1 to 60, it's different now. It's not the same classic. Is Wrath the same classic as vanilla? Fuck no. Like,
Wrath's
there's
my
basically
favorite,
no
though.
world PvP, and I love Wrath. And what do you love about Wrath? The instances are great. You know, like the world is really immersive. The raids are, the raid
Good
with the lore is
rotations.
super cool. The classes are interesting. You want to know what's true about Kata? The rotations are interesting, right? Like it's still pretty immersive. You get to kill Onyxia, Nefarian again. You get to go kill Cho'Gall. Interesting boss. Ragnaros is back. Throne of the Four Winds is a great raid. We'll just forget the third tier of Kata and you look at the first two, and it's great. The heroics are legitimately amazing, especially if they're pre-nerf. They're challenging. They're interesting. You have to use your CC. I'd argue that the heroics in Cataclysm are far more classic than the heroics of Wrath. Heroics and Wrath are free loot pinatas, whereas the heroics, they feel expansive and big and difficult and like an adventure in a way that they don't in Wrath, and the way that they do in TBC, right? But those dungeons are different from the vanilla dungeons, right? But any change, I think you just because it's a change doesn't mean it's bad. You have to look at what the game is and how it's played, and the way that people play the game right now, the way that people appreciate it. It's not mostly in the 1 to 60 world, so. Don't even look at it. Don't look at that. Focus on what's in front of you, which is the raids are sick, the rotations are good, the gearing is good, reforging is cool. Like reforging with stats is legitimately a cool thing. You get more control over what your stats are. Yeah, you get less control over your talents, but for most people that's not gonna matter. For the vast majority of people, are they theory crafting new builds? No, they're just playing the game, and the content is really good. It's really interesting. The gear sets look cool. Things are cool and fun and good. And so is that, if that's not enough of a reason to release it, that the game is good if it were to be played today, I think it would be better received if not for nostalgia, especially in the first two phases, than Wrath. Honestly, it should be. If you look at Ulduar plus Nax, first two phases of Wrath, or if you look at the first two phases of TBC, you look at you look at Groll, Kara, and then T5, and you look at the first two phases of Kata, it really is one of the only ones that gets worse as it goes on, not the opposite. And so the first two are amazing. The first tier of Kata is like chef's kiss. It's so beautiful. Second tier is also really, really great. Third one sucks, but yeah, first two are great. So come on, who cares about the last tier anyway? It's just you just say, okay, you just quit for the next expansion.
I wonder how much of it is just like built-in stigma, right? Because I think that there's a lot.
In part, it's gotta be, right? Like,
right?
Because it's like, it's the flying, and it's done X, Y, and Z way, and people, for good reason, right? People hated LFR.
Yep,
people
hated
it.
Still
in ways
hate
that
LFR.
They didn't hate in the ways that they didn't hate LFG.
Nope, I love LFG.
Some people really like LFG, but most people, I want to say the vast majority of motherfuckers hate, in the classic community anyway, hate LFR.
I mean,
right? And so people think that, they taste that, they're like, oh yeah, well if they're gonna add kata, it's gonna be LFR. They didn't even add Dungeon Finder, and people like that. People like that. They did the unpopular thing and didn't add Dungeon Finder. You think for a moment that they would even remotely consider seriously adding Raid Finder? Absolutely not. There is no way in hell.
Probably not.
So-
Probably not. Well, and you kind of hit on what kind of happened over the course of that episode 118 is we were going over all the things that change. And I just kind of like during the show realized I didn't hate as much as I thought I hated. I hated talents. I hated LFR. I wasn't super fond of the guild leveling thing just because there was some really powerful things towards the end of it.
Oh yeah, it was really weird. Yeah, like the mass res and the mass summon were a little sus.
But you are definitely right. I found out that there was less that I disliked and more that I liked that I just kind of forgot about. Also, we came across the thing at that time where like if it came out classic wise, the timing of everything coming out would be very different than the timing that was excruciating in like actual kata for new stuff to come out.
Yeah. No, for sure. And so, I mean, you get different pacing, you get different approaches to the game. Maybe maybe they uncap the talent trees and make it so you can do these weird probably not, because the balance was done with that in mind and there's powerful stuff. They'd have to do a lot of work to revisit that, but is a talent tree lock and an LFR that they won't probably implement worth not visiting an entire, like an entire expansion of really good content? Blackwing Descent is an amazing raid, and the Twilight Bastion, same thing, fantastic raid with the end heroic boss that's like a secret boss. You get Dragon Slayer from killing it, and it's a really fun fight, and a lot of those fights are really, really, really fun fights. A lot of the content is really, really good and compelling. I think that the professions in that are terrible, though. I think that people don't really remember how bad they were, and maybe I'm remembering wrong, but I remember the professions being so weird and awful. Like the engineering goggles, you had to like socket your own gears in them to like you provide the stats, so they're not like this weird janky item, and they're good, but like I don't know. I remember being very turned off by it.
I completely forget.
Yeah.
Well, I think,
but that could be just like a like a bad memory thing as well. I'd have to look into it. I'm not sure what the profession metas end up really being and what they really look like. But what I do remember, and what the vast majority of people will experience for most of their content, is the raids and the dungeons, and they are both top tier for the first two phases.
Well, and I just think that like maybe if I was back in the day and wasn't that close to everybody and didn't have a whole bunch of friends in the game, like, maybe I would quit and just do something else possibly, like, but I don't know. I think it's going to be a big pusher for a lot of people. That the timeline is just, it's just amazing to know what's coming and know generally about when you're going to go to the next phase. And it just makes life a lot better. But yeah, well, those were the voicemails, and we are quite a bit in, so we're going to try to get through this because I really want to interview North. But
I'll let you know. I don't know how familiar you are with my visits on Countdown to Classic. Every single one without exception. I don't think there's a single one where we've gone on time. Not one.
I haven't missed one since he came back for prior to TBC. I didn't know about it prior to that, but I haven't missed one since.
Also, I feel like Bob at this point understands that we're gonna go over, and he plans for that. Josh does not. Josh will be like, "Yo, we're gonna do like a 45-minute chat about this thing," and 2 hours later, he's like, "Okay, guys, I don't know how we got here."
Yeah. So. No, I planned for 2 to 3 hours, but we have hard cutoffs today, so. Yeah, Josh is always like, I did that wrong, but I just know that we're going to talk a lot. So, I didn't in the beginning. I first started this pod as a every other week hour-long podcast, and then we're like, well, let's do every week because we're going too long. And then we did every week. We still went long.
It's the trap. Bro.
Yep. But what's everybody been doing in WoW lately? I mean, you talked a little bit about it, so you basically been raid logging and doing a bunch of hardcore?
Yeah. I will say in Wrath right now, my guild is we've done some PTRing, which we'll get to with Ulduar stuff. And then we've been like pumping speedruns of Next 25. Like we're like a dad guild. We don't like practice speedruns on the PTR. We basically just use our normally scheduled raid nights to practice new polls and new strategies. And yeah, we're just gonna try to get into like the top 50 in the world. That's our goal before the end of the phase. So we're trying to get like a sub 50 minute. I think our fastest right now is like 51:40 or something. And that's actually been a lot of fun. Like that's what's one of the reasons that I am still doing all my homework, I guess, for Wrath of the Lich King is like when we get to do those things, like that is a very, very fun part of my week. But outside of that, yeah, I'm playing a lot of hardcore WoW on classic era. So like the true vanilla experience, and just like, level up characters, try not to die. That's what I'm doing.
Nice. Yeah, we're actually going to we're going to try to get it to about an hour is what we're going to push for. And we're doing the same thing. And we've only practiced polls like 1 week and maybe a couple polls the week prior, so it's not like we did it super hardcore, but I think we can hit an hour, so we're gonna try that too. Yeah. What about you, North?
We have been aggressively PTRing. I was tasked at the beginning of I was leading Phoenix God with Marky Mark, which was a speed kill guild back in TBC. And then I quit when Sunwell came out because I did not like the content in Sunwell, and I was having some IRL issues. And I need to figure out some stuff about my motivations, and like I wasn't very happy, and I blame Blizzard because the content wasn't. No, I'm kidding. But I sorted that stuff out, and I came back, and that group's no longer playing because the guy that I ran it with, Mark, he didn't want to raid TBC Wrath all that much, and so we disbanded the group. We were gonna try and get something going on Benediction because we had a bunch of players in Benediction. That kind of fell through because I wasn't really interested in putting that much time in, because the players that we played with, love them to death. They can be a bit of a handful sometimes, and so it was becoming more of a headache it was like a leaning at the end. We did really well. We got number 1 in the West for we were number 3 overall. We were behind a Chinese guild and a Korean guild, both which class stacked like crazy for speed kills. And we were the only one, we were the fastest one that didn't class stack. We were above bipolar after only trying to do it for 1 patch. And we were really happy with our result. But as I did that, I made a lot of sacrifices to do that in terms of my own personal health, but also in terms of building this roster, which was like a leaning tower, a very, very, like it was like trying to play Jenga with wet sand. Like it just doesn't, like it doesn't even begin to think that it would be feasible. And somehow we managed to this like leaning tower of a guild. We managed to throw it together, and ultimately people weren't always on the same page, and that caused it to be so onerous that I needed to quit. It was too much for me.
You get like a lot of big personalities, which oftentimes people that are really good kind of have, and a lot of egos. Mm-hmm. Shit gets rough.
And it ended up being really, really, really hard to deal with that. And it was just becoming not fun for me anymore. And that kind of fun was overshadowing. Well, it was filling a sort of a lack of fulfillment that I was getting in my real life. And so when it stopped being that, it was clear that it was just, okay, this is now, holding on to this is just sunken cost. I need to cut my ties here. And then I was asked to join like a friendly, fun project on Benediction, which has really good players from retail. Like my friend from retail, he invited me to the guild. I played with him in Phoenix God, and they're all like, we're super casual in that guild, but lots of really good players, and it's a really weird environment because no one cares about any of the loot. No one cares about it. Like we just like no loot drama at all. The healers are god tier. Like they're amazing. Like they're so good. The DPS aren't that good because we don't really care. Like we're not like min-maxing the hell out of it, but like the support on that guild's amazing, but they don't try at all. Like we're mostly like 18, 19 manning raids because the guild leader can't be fucked to recruit. Like he just doesn't care. And so Ulduar will be interesting with them. I was asked to join a project that I I've played with T Mugsy before. He used to lead.
Oh yeah.
And he and I were trying to make a guild on Som. Those health problems kind of coincided right as Som began. And so I stepped out, but then that guild that he led for the remainder of Som, he brought it to Wrath, and he was like, yeah, I want to do good stuff for them because he wants to make a group for them. Like he wants to get a good community together for future versions of WoW, but also for Ashes and stuff. So I'm currently trying to hammer out that roster. And so I've spent the better part of the last few weeks like preparing for PTR, splitting aggressively in EOE and OS to try and get as much gear as possible. I was playing Demo Lock for a while. I have quit and re-rolled in the last like 4 weeks of the patch because I just need to be home. You know, I need to be on Mage. I can't not be on Mage. So I now have 4 level 80 mages now. Because I can't do anything else. It's so comfortable, like especially if we're trying to make a group good, right? I can human DBM for everyone if I'm playing Mage because I just like if something happens, I know every button. Like I could do it in my sleep. I could do it in my sleep while drowning in sand, like while actively being tortured by the CIA. I could still do my rotation fine and have good situational awareness. And when I'm on lock, I just can't. Like I'm uncomfortable. I'm not as interested. I'm not as excited because it's not what I know. It's not what I love. And so I swap back to that. So I'm aggressively gearing this character the past couple of weeks. So I'm about to go steal a bunch of gear from one of our raids in a couple hours.
Nice.
Yep.
This is live. Unlucky. Hopefully no one's watching from my guild. But yeah, so that's what I've been doing. We aggressively PTR'd a lot of cool weak auras that I've been making, a lot of cool plater scripts to try and because our guild is not the strongest. I'm not gonna you know, I don't need to be crazy about it. A lot of people are not super invested in the idea of like going for prog because we want to go for prog. So it's been a bit of an uphill battle and trying to find people when you haven't put up a good number for that avenue, right? If you haven't put up good speed times, you can't really recruit people for good speed times. So I'm kind of having to do the Jenga tower thing again, but on better terms where I'm happier and healthier and less, less concerned. So I'm just, I work out a lot. I eat a lot of good food and I make weak auras so I don't have to yell at people. So the weak auras can yell at them instead.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's a rough thing. And I think guild leadership should really do go above and beyond to try and like let their guild know the reason we're rushing through raid. I know you guys want to chill and everything, but it's Warcraft. Like, don't blame them. Blame Warcraft logs because it's impossible to recruit good players if you don't have, at least, decent times.
Yeah. It's like
even the dogs are mad.
Yeah, they know, man. It's so because I was in guild leadership up and through the beginning of TBC, and it's like, if you're not notable in some form or fashion, it's really hard to get people. And so, but if you don't care about speedrunning or parsing as a guild and you're just like you're what is appealing about you is like your culture, the group of people that you're playing with, and whether that's like staying in WoW or doing more things outside of WoW, like it's so hard to find those people. I remember
it's so hard for them to find you too.
Yeah, exactly, because they
there's not good tools for that, right?
It has to be emergent, and that because like there's no like how you're gonna be like, hey, like you're gonna post in the Faralina Discord for recruitment when there's literally 8 posts a minute. Yeah, be like, hey, our vibes are immaculate, like like it's they're really the best. Well, that's right. Like we listen to jazz on Tuesdays together.
But I have a brilliant personality.
I actually tried. So like pre-classic coming out. So this is like in like July of 2019 when there was like a guild recruitment Discord and all this stuff. Every single post was the same. It was all semi-hardcore. We're going to raid 2 or 3 nights a week. We're going to strive for speed and progression. It's all the same bullshit. And so I got to a point where I was like, I'm going to include like the baseline stuff at the top that just says like, yes, we are going to like be good players. And then the rest of it, I was like, here's who we are. Here's what we aspire to be. Like, here's our culture. Because for me, it was like, I would rather like 10 times out of 10, I would rather play with someone who I like playing with than someone who's like just a better player, but a shitbag, like every single time. but finding those people,
if people
so
get
hard.
uninterested, right? If people get uninterested because they don't like who they're playing with, it doesn't matter how good they are. Right?
Yeah.
It like, for instance, Locke, Demonology Locke's great class, and it's not good as Mage right now, right? Like, but even if it were better, if it were in the state that Affliction and Unholy were, it wouldn't matter. You know, if it were that much better, if you're not having fun playing it, the player's going to burn out. You're not going to, things aren't going to mesh. You don't have that chemistry, and things ultimately just will always collapse. I think almost always. And so, right, like, what's the alternative is just building it over a long period of time. And that's part of why I agreed to come back as early as I did. Like, I just quit for one patch and I was like, okay, what I need to do when I need to just grin and bear making a group of players that I want to make on my own terms slowly to the sort of requirements that I have. And so it's not going to happen overnight. It's not going to be easy or quick by any means. But I think that ultimately I want a good group of players to play with consistently, that are generally speaking on the same page and have, I think really an enormous amount of respect for each other's time and just respect for each other as individuals, because I haven't ever seen that in pretty much any guild that I've ever played in. And I want to try and make that possible, both so the communities can be better, but also so that I can have a really good group of players to play with and enjoy, because I love games.
Yeah. Yep. That's one thing that I do well. I'm always there on time, ready. I don't miss raids. I'm a pain in the ass in other ways, but that is one of the things that I'm really good at, is being there. But all right. Well, so what I've been doing recently is been raid logging, and I've been playing Final Fantasy Remake, because there's a DLC that I didn't get to play on PS4 because it's only on PS5. And then I've been playing the re-released PSP Final Fantasy VII Crisis Core. So that they like remastered that. So I've been playing those because I love those. And so, yeah, I've been doing that. That's all I've been doing. So, yeah, let's move on to time for the news. All right. So
I looked away from my screen for a moment. I thought that was you. I thought that you were actively doing it, and I was I was shocked.
Okay, so the intro is not me actually beatboxing. A lot of people think that, but that is me.
No, it does sound like you, but I thought you were
news.
I thought you were doing it actively, and I was like, wait, and I looked at you, and then you weren't speaking, and I was like, oh my god, like, why? It just caught me off guard. My bad.
No problem. For Nomragan.
Same.
Sorry. Okay, I'm having too much fun. All right, so first up in the news, they came out and said that they are not going to buff tier 8 sets any more than the 6 item level that they buffed. I understand this. I'm not a huge fan of it, but at the same time, when I called for this change to happen, because I said it weeks, I don't know if you know that, North, but I had the idea to nerf the gear. And then my second one was like, okay, well, if you're not going to nerf them, buff the gear to make Ulduar better longer. I said that on the show 6 weeks prior to them coming out with their first blue post. But I just wish they would have buffed everything by 6 instead of the hard modes by 12, because it just pushed the hard mode gear even further from the other gear. But yeah, so how do you guys feel?
It didn't push it further. The item level, the differences are conserved. The differences across the board,
percentage-wise,
conserved. No, in terms of the item level difference. So the difference is exactly the same. This is how it was before. Tier gear was worse. They increased it by the same amount across the board. So yes, it's significantly lower. It's 232 now, the improved gear, level 20, the 25-man gear, compared to 252, which is, which I believe is just weapons and armor, I believe, are all 252, everything except for Valinir. The 10-man weapons were always weirdly high, so they're like 249, whereas that gear is slightly lower when it's not. I think it's 245, the hardware gear on 10-man. But all those differences were conserved. It was 20 item level difference. It was 20 apart, which is bonkers.
Really?
Yes. So the differences are exactly conserved, to my knowledge, from based on what I was doing and the research that I was doing. It was just crazy.
Could that happen?
They didn't expect it.
Well, yeah, but how could that happen if they only buffed normal by 6 and hard mode by 12? If they were always 20 apart, that should have put them 26 apart, right?
So I didn't look at normal. I looked at 25 man. So it went from 226 to 6. It went from it didn't go from 252 from
it went from 240 to 252, right?
Some pieces, but the Algalon gear, which is the gear that is in question here, the gear that is on the majority of keepers, the better stuff, I believe, was 246. Let me look this up quickly just so I can item level changes Ulduar, and you guys can. I'll get my notes back in the numbers because I had it somewhere. Because I thought the same thing that you did, and then I was like,
Okay. Well, then I just know that they said they were buffing hard by 12 and normals by 6. I do not remember the exact. I feel like it was 226. I feel like was what regular 25 man was before, but I don't remember what regular hard was. But so they do come out in this post and point out that, like, listen, guys, like, if you want your entire raid to have all of their, all 52 slots that their class can handle, that's going to take about 33 weeks. So this isn't something you should be shooting for. So it kind of makes it feel worse just because you're like, oh, shit, I'm just like, you're just going to have to know you're not going to get a lot of this gear. There's going to be a ton of people that don't get it.
Isn't sort of the point of this, though, that like this 252 gear is going to rival some like TOC gear, right? Like the whole point of them buffing the Ulduar gear was to make that high end Ulduar gear last longer through TOC. So when they say stuff like, hey, if everyone in your guild if that 252 gear means a lot to you, it's going to take a long time to get. I think that just leans into them, trying to push people to continue running Ulduar even after TOC comes out because they love Ulduar and they know that the players have more fun in Ulduar than they do in TOC. So it all is going with that same message in my mind.
Yeah. Let me correct myself. I am 100% wrong. I'm not sure how I am this off. You're right. It was buffed by 13. A lot of the weapons. So Star Edge, for instance, 239 normally, and now it's 252. Whereas the tier was bumped 6. I'm not sure why I missed that mark, but I think that despite that fact, even though the differences aren't conserved, I do think that it makes it interesting for 2 reasons. One, you do actually get a new sort of gear paradigm here, which is really nice. A lot of people are huge fans of tier being good, and I don't agree with them that. And when I messaged Agron about this, actually, I was like, why was this the change? Right. And
I think a lot of people messaged him, by the way.
Yeah, and I was like, well, why was this to change? Can you explain that to me? Because also I want to, I often, sort of probe him for his thoughts. And he said, well, we thought that we thought about buffing the tier gear, and we realized that what that would create is too much of a curve in favor of nerfing the content easily. But part of the reason why we wanted to bring it in line and make it as further as it was is for that reason. We want it to be replayable. Valinir being buffed also helps it be, relevant longer because it does get, it is similar enough to be replaced in ICC when it's not buffed. And now it becomes a real stable piece. And so if you bring everything in line with that in mind, you don't make Valinir necessary and mandatory for DPS players in the same way. And so then you still maintain Ulduar hard modes as a viable thing to do long term. And you only have to do specific bosses, right? So you can go back into Ulduar, kill Flame Leviathan, kill XT, and then kill Kolagarn and just walk to whatever boss that you want, so long as it's not Vzax or Yogg.
Well, and
two of which don't have particularly good items, or you could just do them all on normal as well, and then do whatever you need on hard mode.
Then even on top of that, think about when TOC comes out, you could just be like, well, now I get to really have a chance to fill in my slots because you can get 25 man loot from 10 man, and from what I hear, the 10 man hard modes pale in comparison to the 25 mans.
Have they confirmed that they're going to? So I know for a fact that they're doing it with Naxx. Obviously, they've told us they're doing it with Naxx. Do we know that they're going to do that with Ulduar? I assume that they will, but have they said anything?
They have said like they're going to monitor how this goes, and that's going to make the call. It's not a for sure, but I have a feeling a lot of people are going to like this Naxx change, because just think about Molten Core in vanilla and everybody getting drug in just because we got to get that other binding, and it's just like, and this person doesn't have their Core Hound belt, so we actually have to go to Rag, and this way you can be like, hey, you can do 10-man, you guys want to come on your alts, like it's super chill. It might be harder to go on your alts maybe when Ulduar comes out. I don't know. We're gonna have to just kind of see how that goes. But yeah, if they do that, filling in those gear pieces later while you're going through TOC, it feels better at that point because you have multiple areas to get like that TOC-esque gear, like that really high gear.
Yeah. Yeah, no, for sure. And I think that the thing that they want to prevent as well with this sort of buff was making it so that you like walking into the staple pieces you get in Ulduar aren't just immediately replaced by 10-man TOC, which is kind of what happens.
That's what happened to me back in the day.
Exactly. And that feels really bad, especially like with the staple hard mode pieces, and you get people more of a reward. But I think the sort of the split side of this, I think they care about that a little less, and I care about that a little less than creating nerfs in the content through gearing, right? Like having you feel a real difference from itemization. You're going to feel really good when you get a 252 piece of gear, because it's going to impact your rate a lot, and it's going to impact you a lot, and you're going to feel really big from having gotten that, and it's going to make the content easier. So yes, the hard modes are difficult, and a lot of people won't be able to do them, but hard mode VZAX, pretty approachable. Hard mode, at least like the early hard mode, like what the Molgheim option, instead of Steelbreaker and Iron Council, pretty approachable. Thorim hard mode, ultimately pretty approachable. The forms of Freya with 2 instead of all 3 keepers, pretty approachable. Hodir, once you get a little bit of 232 gear, also pretty approachable. And so as you get these pieces, if it were just, okay, tier is buffed necessarily, okay, that's great. Maybe people suggest, okay, have one piece of gear drop from tier that is a heroic piece of tier, but that involves work being done, new vendors being added, new stuff being added, makes it a little confusing to new players. Whereas what really is sacrificed by them already having buffed this gear, not giving you tier as the default bis. I think it makes it really interesting, because then you have these, okay, certain slots are not actually available in 252 or not available in a good stat combination 252. So you have to create, okay, can I get this 2-piece? How do I slot this in? Gearing becomes really, really interesting. What stats can I drop? What specs become good because they can't actually deal with all this hit rating. Where can you find the good pieces, and how do they slot in? You have really, really interesting gearing decisions that I think the tier is cool, but for a very long time, and when tier is good, it's too good, I think. It's not, okay, I'm sacrificing stats for a really good bonus. It's either it has the best stats and the best bonuses that nothing else has, and they can't even remotely compare. And it becomes something like an artifact weapon. It's like, hey, well, I have to have this on. And if I don't have this on, I'm just fried. That sucks. I think that really sucks. And the later versions of Ulduar tier, of Wrath tier are going to work that way. You think a mage can't run 4-set in ICC, you're fucking fried if you think that no one can run 4-set as an 18% damage buff on mirror image for 30 seconds. You have to, right? So you're forced to wear that, and your one permutation, your one option, your one ability to customize goes up to at least 3, if not 5, when tier is not unquestionably dominant. And for some classes it still is. So it creates this push and pull with loot, and it lets it be thoughtful and interesting. And it's not that they need everything to come in line with this. It's not that they need to nerf every single tier to have this in line, but I think that it's an interesting and cool change. I think that people are actually going to be able to do more with this, not less.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah. And I mean, I was just saying, I think it feels bad for people just looking at that big gap. But I do get it. And I kind of changed my mind in the middle of it. Maybe that extra 6 on the hard mode gear is pretty cool. Like, Yeah.
Especially given that they're making the hard mode super hard, right? Like it's an uphill battle. You want to step into Algal on week 1. You don't have 6 fucking paladins. Good luck, brother. He's gonna murder you because that's it's pretty fucking challenging. And,
I think
it's more of a comp challenge. But if you're not on point with those cooldowns, if you're not crisp as hell, right? Like guilds were organized in Algalon, real big favor to them. But that feels good then, because then you can keep approaching it and keep going back to it. And it's okay. Well, Mimram's not that hard anymore because we do more damage and our healers heal more and we have more health and our tanks are tankier. And that feels good. It feels good to naturally progress in that way instead of Naxx, where it's like, okay, well, everything falls over instantly. All right, great. Now I'm just sitting here waiting to roll the dice on a good piece of loot. Fuck, KT didn't drop my fucking 226 item again. Guess I'm cucked for another week. That feels awful. Whereas like getting cool shit and being able to fail, I think is really interesting. I think it's so interesting. And I think it's so cool to have a good reward for it, because if you're going to introduce that kind of failure, the reward I think has to be appropriate. And I think we see that here.
Yeah. I think the difficulty level paired with how good they're making some of this loot is perfect. I think that just like what we've seen on the PTR is a great example of that. Like if you're a guild, you could be like one of the best guilds in the world, but if you haven't PTR'd at all, like you're gonna have struggle with all the hard modes, right?
Oh god, yeah. I mean, everybody struggled with them hard, So
one pulling any of these bosses is going to be impressive, because there's always something. On Hodir, it's making sure the buffs go out, right? On Freya, it's usually the lashers, but also just how you're dealing with sunbeams and how you're dealing with Nature's Fury, right? On Mimron, it's just phase 2 is killer, but also when you need to see these things, and it has such a more natural form of progression, because it does really help. Getting a little bit of time in does really help, because you just get more comfortable, and I think it's really nice as a result. I think it's a much more natural, old style progression that we remember. It's the thing that people remember about Molten Core, about BWL. It's like, well, how do we do this? How do we solve this problem together? And ultimately, it's pretty easy to do in a modern group with people having information. But in Ulduar, it's difficult enough where you get that feeling back. So.
Yeah, I would love to see like a typical old school raid go into Molten Core and see what that looks like, because typical old school raids, didn't really realize warriors were any good until about Naxx, like late AQ Naxx. So it was and they still weren't even that good, because they didn't figure out Fury tanking, so they still had to hold back a ton. So
for sure, for the wait for 5 Sunders meme, right? Like
yep.
And we're not bound by those same rules anymore. So
and the whole 5, the whole 5, because back in the day, I should go on a tangent, but we didn't actually have the inside knowledge to make true threat meters. So in Molten Core and BWL, it was like a guessing game by the actual threat manager. So like we had them, but they were just like, they weren't exactly accurate. So yeah, it's interesting.
Yeah. Omen finally got good, I think, in CBC. I remember I had it in T5 and Kara, I think, for the first time, and it was pretty reliable then, but there were still some people would always have problems. They'd be like, oh, my Omen's not showing this, that, and the other. People were just so bad with everything back then that it was really different. And my lord, doing Algalon without weak auras, especially with like worse groups, I play Marionette, and like with my raid, and I write like it's okay, star 1, star 2, star 3, star 4, star 5, star 6, and I have different cooldowns, potentially 2, maybe 3 cooldowns going out each time. And if I didn't have a weak aura that's sent to that person exactly what I can't say, you use this and you use this and you use this. Yeah, you could have it on a spreadsheet where it says, okay, star 4, these 3 people go. But if I don't have a weak aura that's popping up with the exact icon, they might press the wrong spell. They might forget. They're doing other things. They're healing other people. The tank is getting smashed throughout all of it. So asking healers to have those cooldowns without modern resources does make it so different. Like weak auras are, I think weak auras are too powerful. Weak auras are
Dude,
dumb.
I think
I use them because they're there, but weak auras
Yeah.
are dumb. They should be eliminated, blah, blah, blah. Everyone has this talk and they always come to the same conclusion. Fuck weak auras. But like, it's cool the things you can do. Like I have the thing in the middle of my screen with Freya, the Freya Thames pack. She has a kick every once in a while and you have to use a defensive cooldown on hard mode to survive it, more or less, because there's a lot of raid damage going out sometimes. And if you get kicked on that, you're fried. Like it's fucked. But the weak aura will actively check for your cast time versus when it's going to go off. And it will tell you if that cast is cool to stick or not. And it has a huge little like circle forming on your screen that if it's in danger, it turns red. And then it's like, okay, well, I stopped casting now that I turn red. And it's impossible to miss. Which just makes it when in a fight where you're dealing with 50 other things, you're dealing with Sunbeams and Nature's Fury and this and that, there's the kick on top of it, which back in the day made it a damn challenging encounter, but it's not that bad. Why? Because we have the tools. So...
Yeah, I thought,
which I don't like, to be clear.
And
it doesn't sit right with me.
I think part of the reason why the team was so willing to like dive into Ulduar and make these fights more challenging is because they know that we are modern WoW players playing an older game with more resources than we have ever had.
Yeah.
Yeah, and you talk about weak auras. Like I can't even imagine running a raid. So we started a second raid group. It's at the start of Wrath. It's the one that I main tank on, and my raid leader Harskar was calling everybody's cooldowns, like the priests, the paladins, and like these were people that were new that he didn't know, right? And I'm like, how does he just off the top of his head know who to call? And then I found out that he has a weak aura that shows everybody, like everybody's class, their name, and like what they
and
what they have on cooldown. And I was like, God, if you didn't have that, imagine how hard it would be. It'd be like somebody do this, somebody do that, or you'd have to have something like written down, or like
exactly. And
that's like one of
Go ahead.
I was just gonna say that's like in my mind that is like the epitome of like retail seeping into classic. Because every time that I've ever watched like any mythic raiding or race to world first or whatever, it's like almost like everyone in the raid has weak auras that are just like, oh, here's all of the major defensives in our raid. Here's all of our battle reses.
And the raid leader isn't even in there.
Usually people use people actually use an add-on for it now, and they use the same add-on that they use its method raid tools, and so that shows everyone's cooldowns, and you can press on it, like you don't even have to bind it. You can just click on it on the icon in question or on the ability. If you have a bar, I use icons, people use bars, and it will tell that person use this ability and will link the ability. And you can go a step further, and I've gone a step further. I have that, and so it like in order to play the raid, like I'm some kind of conductor. I give them weak auras that when they receive a whisper that includes a certain code or phrase, and they have that ability off cooldown, it will make a sound, it will put an aura in the middle of their screen, and it only can come from me, and then it will cause them to use the cooldown, and if they don't use the cooldown, it stays, and if they use the cooldown, it goes away. So it is literally, I can pop up at any given moment anything that I want. If I want the priest to PI, I press PI, my PI macro, or I click on the PI thing. Instantly, it's on the priest screen. No way to miss it. Sound effect up, rubber ducky squeaking in his fucking ears, and he knows what to do. And if we didn't have that for everything, like doing Mimron, we progged Mimron with mostly pugs, and so we didn't have that available to us. Progging Mimron was actually pretty tough with that when you have to make sure that the cooldowns go one after the other. You want to combine T-Sacks or separate them with Aura Masters, etc., because you really cannot survive those heat waves. Like it's really, really hard.
Dude,
and face the firefighter. But doing it with that is so much easier.
So everybody's talking about weak auras, and back in like, the first BWL 2006, like I thought I was cool because I was the rogue officer, and we talked about, five sunders and all, right? So there was a certain time in the fight where I'd want all the rogues to vanish, just to clear threat. So I just made a macro that sent in our like rogue chat that we made, like if how you can make a chat, and it just said vanish now eight times. So it would fill their chat screen, and so they would see that. So that was like the old school way of doing what's become so crazy.
Found a way, and like everyone, no one had voice activity back then. So like everyone was pushed to talk on Ventrilo, right? So at least in my experience. And if you weren't, it was because you were like in Skype doing arena, because then you'd have voice activity on Skype, right? Which was like, that was the meta. And so everything was just a bit slower, right? Like everything, you know, we didn't have these tools, but have notes on our screens. Our boss mods weren't as good. And so it ended up being way different. But I think some of it goes a little too far. I think, yeah, for sure. Like the screens, the resolutions were smaller. Yeah.
4.3 is a huge loss of, you know, add-on real estate. You know, you look at these old UIs and you're like, oh my God.
Yeah.
Is that another X-Pearl?
It's people. One of my guildies still uses X-Pearl, and I'm like, bro, this is so ugly. Please,
it is so ugly. There is other skins for it, but at the time it was so good because it's like
it was revolutionary.
Nothing showed you nothing showed you percentages or anything. Like that was so nice, and it would show you cast timers. There was nothing to show you cast timers at that time, so I definitely get it. But okay, so. Let's move on to the PTR came out once again and opened up for this last weekend, made scheduling guests impossible for me. That's why we're recording on Monday. But yeah, did you guys play it, and thoughts?
I did. I wasn't able to do very much of the first time around, but I had guildies that said that there were a couple changes here and there. And then just in general, them like opening up PTR again. I assume it's because they're just trying to fine tune a lot of the details, because I know that there were a ton of bugs through the first one. And I don't know. I think there's always there's like a weird balance, I think, between having the PTR up long enough to get good information to fix the fights and leaving it up for too long so that guilds start using it as like full on practice, right? And they're just like, oh, we're not here to test this fight. We're here to like practice.
I didn't want him to bring it back out just because I really want wipes by the big guilds on the race. I really want wipes. I want it to be like,
you're gonna see them. You're gonna still see them.
I am so excited for this race over any other.
Mm-hmm.
I like want to watch it rather than raid that night. So I'm kind of bummed that I'm going to be raiding and streaming. And I mean, our boy Sarth will probably make a nice little video, you know, about an hour long that'll just walk us through everything. But I would love to like watch it, you know? So I don't know. I think this could turn out to be the coolest one ever. I do think, in my opinion, the coolest one ever so far was SSC and those rocket boot parachute pipes moves. Like, I thought that was pretty damn neat. But yeah, I just want to see struggle.
Yeah, that's like, honestly, that's like the most unfortunate thing. And I wish that more guilds took advantage of that when like PTRs would come out. Because I know Fusion has this idea of like, PTR comes out, like, we want to be world first on the PTR and we're going to stream it all. And so then they're like, they're
been really cool. It's been really cool to watch.
Cool. That's
and
what
watch
I
them
want
work. Yeah, we've talked
me.
about this a few times. Like, I love watching them talk through what they're going to do, because it takes me back to when I did prog 8 hours a day, 5 days a week, and we don't do that now. Now it's like, all right, guys, rewatch the video. We're going to tweak this one little thing, but they're trying like new things, whole new things. Like, it's really cool to just see them talk through it and get that insight on what the top guilds do.
Yeah, and I think it's honestly, I genuinely think that it's a better test of how good a guild is to see them approach these like new fights for the first time and see who like if every guild that like jumped into the PTR the second like the next phase of content was put on there, if they all streamed and they all raced on the PTR, I think that would be such a better indicator of their skill as a group of players than it is to see like, okay, who put in the most hours on the PTR so that when it comes out on live servers, they can like full clear it in, you know, an hour or whatever it is.
On the counterpoint to that, it would be unhealthy for the degenerate classic players that Just imagine Fusion might have done a 24-hour stream trying to get that first, if they didn't have practice on the PTR.
I mean, yeah, but like,
I'd watch it.
I would love that. Because I'm a big fan of the retail Race to World First. I think that that's like some of the most compelling PvE content you can come up with. And I think that one of the reasons that Classic keeps getting laughed at is like we have these like quote unquote races. Race to World First, race, progression races, and they're all so fast, and everyone's always like, well, of course, because it's the same content we did 12 years ago or whatever. But Ulduar is an example of like this is like these bosses I don't think have ever existed in the states that we're going to get them.
Yeah,
right? They're close.
Most of them have not. Most of them are in very unique and interesting places,
and some even with both changes pre-nerf and post-nerf, they went through and searched for what was the hardest, because sometimes things did get harder. So they didn't just go to just cookie cutter pre-nerf. Like they really picked at it. And I thought that was like really neat. It would be cool for everybody. And everybody always makes, when I say I don't want PTR, everybody always says, well, then the private server people win. And that probably is the case, but at the same time, there's a lot of stuff that they find that is way different than it was on private servers, and we would have seen that throughout Classic had we not had that. So to make that argument right off the bat, I don't think you have enough proof to fully make that argument. I just think you're probably right. It's probably most likely.
Well, I think that's kind of been disproved since TBC came out, though. I think that was true with Classic. When Classic originally came out, private server groups were far and away better.
Well, and it was way easier than on private servers too, right?
Right, but
way easier.
When going into TBC, I remember there was like a group of like guilds and groups that were like they were TBC private server players and guilds, and they talked a ton of shit to about progress and about and like salad bakers and like all these top like vanilla guilds, and then TBC comes out and like progress destroys everybody, and then and they continue to do so as like the content came out. And the same thing happened coming into Wrath, because Wrath private servers were arguably more popular and more well played than even vanilla servers were. And so then a lot of these Wrath private server guilds, again, were like, we're going to...
Wrath private servers more popular than vanilla private servers?
I think if you looked at players,
I've heard that, but I don't know how we even gauge that.
In terms of longevity, perhaps, right? Like they were there for longer, because the vanilla ones, if they didn't have good pops, they couldn't survive. Whereas you could Warmane could exist forever. Yeah. Right. And Warmane existed in several capacities, but generally speaking, it was Wrath and TBC. Yeah. But I think that it. I would push back against saying more popular without adding any qualifiers to that, because that seems to be a little off the mark.
A lot of people say it. I just don't know.
So I think part of so the qualifiers would be, I think that they were established as being like actual playable like Wrath servers, I think earlier than I would argue like decent vanilla servers were established.
For sure, but also the vast majority of them were run by Warmane, and Warmane has since time immemorial faked its population.
Which that's fair. But I think that the sheer longevity of Warmane and of of the other Wrath private server groups that have come out.
Do you know where the largest group of private server Wrath, like hardcore private server Wrath pushers are currently in terms of any guild, where they are most concentrated?
No, I don't.
Russia?
And I think, but I feel like that's
Russia.
Do you think? Are you going to say they're in progress?
No, they're not.
Oh, I thought you were asking where they were actually at, in the
it is
world.
Close, though. They're in Beef Bar,
which makes sense.
Yeah, which is why Beef Bar crushed them, and which is part of why Beef Bar will crush again. It's not even. It's. I don't think it's even going to be close.
There's a whole weird thing with Beef Bar though, where for
sure they pay their players, right?
Yeah, Beef Bar's players are being paid to raid and push progression and win progression, which is way different than any other guild.
Hard to beat.
Yeah. That's like trying to argue.
But they were before. They were before in TBC. that this is not a new thing. They were in TBC when they lost to Progress. They lost to Progress because of vanilla shit that Progress was really good at, namely pressing invis pots and pressing Miko fast buttons, right? And that's ultimately the only thing that kept them ahead of Beef Bar. And then Beef Bar was like, well, okay, maybe we're not interested in this. And now they're interested in it again, and they reformed a lot of the roster with a ton of Wrath sweats, and now they're walking into it. And they did really, really well. They had a bug on Malagos actually in the race, despite the fact that they had a bug on Malagos and they weren't able to zone into OS. They had to zone in late. They still won, which is wild. They were set back like 2 or 3 minutes by that. And what was a very, very tight race, and they still won, which means, right, and I've seen, I'm friends with a lot of people in Beef Bar. They are far and away, I think, and I might catch some flack for this because I might eventually be wrong, because Progress is also hiding a lot of their stuff, and I don't know a lot about Progress, but it's easily between the two of them.
I think it would be silly to say that Beef Bar is not in contention to win, but I think that it's a weird scenario with Beef Bar. It is. With how many people like were in private server guilds playing private server Wrath of the Lich King to like only have one notable like private server group of players in like the top 5 or top 10. Well, yeah, but like, I don't know. Think about how many private server vanilla guilds like are still pushing in like at the top tier in TBC and Wrath. And I think that that's just a testament to like their like dedication to the game and being at the top than just like private server experience.
Yeah, that's fair.
Yeah, that's fair. You look at an example would be Sal Daly, who, played vanilla, and then has still played at a top level in both TBC and now Wrath. Like it's just his dedication to playing constantly and learning everything that he can.
Like I would argue in like this same vein, right? I bet if you took this current group of Beef Bar and you had like a fresh vanilla, and you had them pumping vanilla like they do Wrath, I bet they would do super well in vanilla, even though they're not vanilla veterans.
Well, a lot of them are. The people that I know are, because that's the people that I know. But yeah, I mean, you're not wrong. But would they beat Progress? No, they wouldn't beat Progress. You throw them into vanilla, those people are way worse at doing what Progress does, and the things that Progress does well are the things that vanilla demands.
Yeah. All right.
In my experience.
We went on a tangent there. It's my bad for bringing it up, but
that's what we do here, Bob.
Yeah, well, we're going to go ahead and move on to the juiciest of the news. And I just have to get a little bit of a laugh out first. So DKs were changed in the PTR. We don't know for sure that it's going to go in or if it's going to get tweaked, but basically, they changed the way snapshotting works for the Gargoyle. To let everybody know that might not know at home what snapshotting is, it's where you are able to take a buff, a trinket proc, an on use trinket, your engineering bracers, yada yada yada. You're able to take those and pop them all at once, and then your Gargoyle is able to keep that for the duration instead of just as long as the buffs are procced on you. So basically, they've changed it to where haste now is dynamic. So it will check to see if you have the buff, throughout, and then when you don't have the buff, it will take the haste from the Gargoyle. It's a pretty substantial nerf, but in my opinion, it needed to be done. Something needed to be done, and if it was me, I would take snapshotting out of the game completely and have everything dynamic. But yeah, what do you guys think of this change?
I hate snapshotting across, and not just because of Gary.
I hate it across the board.
I think it should be. I think that this type of change, where it's a dynamic, it's dynamically rechecking the actual player's stats. If it's a stat that like it's based on the player, and then your summonable thing gets that thing, like it should be continually like rechecking where the player's at.
Do you think with,
'Cause other-
with every mechanic, like, do you think, for instance, Drain Soul, when you start with any cast, right? Like your haste at the end of the cast, if I evocate and I have 100% haste, it's half duration. But if I evocate in the last second of that, then my evocate is half for the whole duration of it, which often mages will do if they have to evocate. Do you think that it should go short and then long? Like it should look like it's going to be half, and then it just extend dynamically. Do you think that would be a solution?
That is what I think.
So I think that's a little. I'm not sure about that. I'm speaking specifically about like summonables, like like fire ellies and things like that. That I definitely think this kind of change is good. I don't know how that would. Because there's other snapshotting too, right? Like there's the Warlock snapshotting, which
snapshotting is very similar to the DK snapshotting, which is really funny actually, because it's essentially what it is, right? It's okay.
Oh yeah, it's the same thing.
What happens if you have way too much fucking haste and you have an ability that will just scale endlessly with haste that's not limited by the GCD, which is what the Gargoyle is. It's just a thing that can do ridiculous things with too much haste. Ultimately, is what it is, and the lock is exactly the same, which is very strange. But it's not all of their, like, right, whereas Gargoyle, you can kind of do it whenever, whereas Drain is a little more, I think, kept in control because you can only use it in very certain circumstances, so it's a little more, it's a little trickier, but it is essentially a very similar mechanic in mind.
Yeah,
I don't mind snapshotting on some stuff, but I agree that snapshotting is a bit like especially for summonables. I think for summonables, it's a little weird. I think it's kind of cringe because for most weird gameplay, like my enhancement shamans would always have like these spell power sets in TBC. You pop it before the boss, like you have this armor, and I think that's kind of it's a little interesting, but I think it's a little toxic. It's the same thing now. What Unholy Death Knights are doing, I'm not sure if you know, they will swap gems to all AP.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
And then they will snapshot the Gargoyle because the AP still snapshots, and then they'll swap back to the regular gems. You know, like for all that nonsense it's a little.
That's the whole thing. Is like I love super sweaty gameplay. I love that's one of the reasons I like vanilla. Right? Is like, man, you can get an edge in vanilla by doing all these different things, spending all this extra time in the game, all this stuff, but I feel like there's a line in Wrath right now where there's just like there's stuff that's like that's not intended to work. Like that's like an oversight. That's not just like an extra buff out in the world that you go.
Not all oversights are, I think, the worst, but I think it's an oversight ultimately. I think the bar here, and I think this should be the bar, it's an oversight that sucks. It really that for me, that's the bar. It's an oversight, like gem swap, like please
gem swapping,
just
weapon
open the door.
Swapping, like all of that stuff.
Well, weapon swapping, I don't mind as much, but because
really?
there's thought involved. There's thought
involved.
It's not
there's
just
not
only
though.
Thing that you can macro.
No, you can. It just doesn't. There's a weak aura that doesn't.
That.
Oh, they did.
They need to get rid of that.
They got rid of it. They got rid of it. They got rid of it fairly early because that crossed the line for them.
I didn't see a
I 100% agree with that. So they did get rid of that. They got rid of that maybe a month ago, maybe a couple weeks ago.
So stuff like that.
That crosses a line. I agree, but like if you're doing it yourself, I think that's cool because that feels very vanilla to me. But yeah, it is too far. It is like largely automated, and when it's those things in unison, it's unrealistic and automated, and I don't know. It just kind of, you know what, when you see it, it is kind of cringe. That for me is way too far. Like I don't like if it's unintentional, it sucks. Another thing, I don't even know if it's unintentional, and I want to talk to you guys about it because I don't know if you saw this. Hodir, we were talking about the PTR, but we're on the thing of unintentional changes or unintentional mechanics. Hodir, if you distract him, if you turn him around with a distract in his room, the mechanic, for anyone who's not familiar, in that fight is he has a ton of health, but he has a bunch of NPCs that he has frozen in your faction. They give you a ton of buffs to help you kill him faster. You have to start the fight usually and kill these flash freezes to free your allies. If you distract Hodir, he doesn't see you. He doesn't see you kill the fight, and he doesn't aggro.
He does
not aggro.
Oh,
no, he
wow.
doesn't. And it's so weird because normally, right, you think, okay, well, when you hit the thing, it'll enter you. So what you can do is you can Curse of Doom normally. You can Curse of Doom them, and it doesn't hit them. It just it tags them, but it doesn't hit them. So it doesn't put you in combat. It puts you in combat for like a second. And so you could Curse of Doom one of them with all your locks, and then it would blow up one, and that starts the fight because damaging them normally does bring him into the fight. Mm-hmm. But if you distract him, damaging them doesn't bring him to the fight, which means one of two things. Either one, some weird, real, incredibly arcane nonsense is going on that I don't and can't explain. Or two, he only pulls if he sees the damage being done to the frost, to the flash freezes, which means that was specifically designed that way.
That's
and
so
it was
weird.
designed that it could be distractible. Because he's specifically looking at all of them, and you turn around. It is, and that's, I don't know if that's intentional or not. It could be intentional. It looks unintentional, but it is brilliant and awesome and cool and lovely, and I really think it's hilarious.
I wonder, like, is it? Because here's the whole thing: is like, is it actually game breaking in any sense? Because I didn't get to do any
Hodir. It doesn't start the timer. It doesn't start the timer until they start attacking him, because you're not in combat yet, not with him. But what happens is you have to still be coordinated, so it's not that big of a deal, because you have to be coordinated and break them out really fast, because the NPCs are like,
they'll attack him right away.
They're like, I'm out, time to blast.
Yeah, exactly. So
you
it's
have
like
to kill them at the same time. So it's largely the same thing. It's a little bit of help for sure, but it's not that big of a deal. I think that they're going to leave it in. You didn't hear that from me, but I think that they are going to leave that in, because it also is just fucking awesome. It's cool. That's fucking super cool. Funny. Sue me. It's hilarious. I really like it. It's fucking based.
So yeah, that to me that falls into, well, there's also, I don't know. Clever use of game
right? So you have to, right? So it is the clever use of game. So what is clever use of game mechanics, right? And what is the standard? So because we only have ever heard clever use of game mechanics, but when the clever use of game mechanics becomes damaging to the experience, to the pillars that they stated at the end of TBC at the beginning of Wrath, that is when when the field goes away and you have to use a weak core to swap all your weapons every 45 seconds, to swap all your gems every single raid. No, bad. No, not good.
Yeah. Yeah, and I mean,
and it's a hard thing to say. It's a hard thing to manage, because it's like, okay, it's the feel then. Well, who manages the feel? Ultimately, it's Blizzard. And it's like, well, then I have to trust Blizzard. Of course, you have to fucking trust Blizzard. It's their game.
Exactly. That's like, and I think too, Blizzard probably pretty quickly gets a sense of these things, even from the community standpoint, right? Because I think that there was like one small group of people that were like, don't mess with Gary. And that group of people was not even all Unholy DKs, because there's a lot of people that would want to play Unholy DK, but they don't want to even do this nonsense. So they're not playing Unholy DK. And I think that when you have that situation unfolding in front of you, like, oh, there's a bunch of people who won't even play this spec because of the shenanigans involved in it, then it's probably good to at least look at it and see, like, does this fall into our design philosophy? And I think that it was very clearly not falling into their design philosophy and the pillars that they presented to us. So I think it's a good change. I don't know how bad or how much other snapshotting things affect. Clearly to them, like mages being able to snapshot haste on like the last stick of evocation, or warlock snapshotting, and these other things are not as egregious as Gary snapshotting and Gary simping has been. So I don't know. For now, I think this is good.
I don't know. Gary's more than a pet, he's my best friend. No, I'm kidding. No. I think the line for me, if I were to be, if I were to put on my developer hat and my, in my armchair setup, it would be when things become like really not intuitive, because like me cast fast, now me start spell, me keep cast fast now makes sense. Right. But if you're like, well, me have haste, so me need proc 8 different things with 8,000 random snapshot, like haste buffs to make flying stone man go like, that's not intuitive at all. That makes no it makes no sense. It's really confusing and bizarre, and it makes it slot machine. So it really is is it intuitive and is it fun, right? If it is fun for some people, but it's not intuitive, and is it damaging, right? So there's like a ton of things that and people think are like, oh, like they just want to no, of course they don't want to do that. They want you to have fun, but they don't want the game to be exploded by, and they see it leaking into other things, and they want to prevent that, because Ulduar content's hard. If Gary is super OP, you're going to do Hodir with, and Hodir has this problem with locks, to be honest. Locks are insane on Hodir, but if Gary becomes super OP, if they have all this gear, and they're already in a really good state, if you have all this gear and you can make the kill times low, are you going to run 10 Unholy DKs on Algalon? You fucking might. you fucking might, because Algalon's not that long of a fight. You might just try and push him to phase 2 because phase 2 is a joke. And Algalon, you have to really last in phase 1 and push through. And the faster it goes, the less cooldowns you have to use. And with gear, that could mean, okay, well, now casual guilds feel need to do this because it's the only way they can approach the content.
Yeah.
And so that really needs to be held in mind. And when people are like, oh, well, in vanilla, look at Fury Warrior, it's so, it's so busted. Like, how could they, like, it's so much more busted than this is. And it's like, well, A, no, but B, more importantly, vanilla is super solved. The content's not hard.
Yeah.
You don't have to bring the warriors. You could bring all dwarves. Go to Grobulus. Bring all dwarves. No mages. You'll be fine. You don't need
well,
them.
and there's not a ton of mechanics either. It's a lot of stand there.
Exactly. And so it's not invalidating things, and it's not so unapproachable without it. And so there are a billion threads that they have to pull from and try and balance at the same time. And it is, I'm not sure that people are underestimating the difficulty, but I think people often do try, like, oversimplify because they are frustrated. And I'm not saying that they shouldn't be frustrated. And I'm not trying to invalidate people's experience as, me no longer have Gary, that feel bad. Oh, you're dumb because you feel bad. No, it feels bad.
Yeah.
They know it feels bad, but they think it's going to feel worse if they were to leave it in. Right.
Well,
and ultimately, that's the thing that you need to understand is the people who are good at this, right? And it's not like, okay, well, because they're an authority. So no, the people that really, really, really fucking care about this think that it's going to be worse, and they understand how pissed you're going to be. They know that, and they're not doing it as fast, in part because they know that you're going to be mad, and they have to even begin to dare to come and hit you with the fucking hammer, and they still decide to do it because they think it's a really fucking big deal. It's not simple for them at all.
Well, and Arcos in chat brings up a point that I've been making for months, that DKs, because of the longer fights in Ulduar, will be nerfed, until the gear catches up, just because of longer fights. But at the same time, it's still, there'd be pressure in different places to lust at certain times, everything else. Like, it's just a big pain in the ass, where it's just be nice to lust when everybody can use it. And then you can use your stuff when everybody else uses their stuff. It's just, for me, it's just not fun gameplay.
That's the whole thing for me, is that when you have people not playing a class or a spec because they don't like all the gimmicks that have been introduced, like there's people in my guild that, like, they don't want to play DK because they don't want to do all the Gary stuff. They would rather play a different class that they enjoy more, or they'd rather play Frost or whatever it may be, because they don't want to do all the Gary stuff. And if that is leaking
into the casuals, it's leaking into the casuals, and that's the bar, right?
Then you're hurting. The game is being hurt by this stuff. Then you got to take it out.
Definitely.
I don't mind so much about the lust thing. I think the lust thing is actually interesting because you have competing thoughts about that. Like, even now, people at the beginning, but you have like the lock question.
All the locks. Yeah,
the locks won it at the end, and there's good reason they won it at the end. So I think that kind of competition, I don't think that it necessarily should be homogenous. I think it's good to make those decisions. It's shitty when people like do the macros to kick people from groups to like lose their buffs and then bring them back so they don't get like, that's dumb, and they're fixing that. But generally speaking, I'm fine with there being competing interests, especially when the content's harder, because then it's really, you have to balance what's good and what's not. I also think that Arcos is right. Unholy is also not good in Ulduar. Like, like at the beginning, it's not going to be good at all on fights, other than it's okay on Mimron. It's good on Steelbreaker. It's pretty bad everywhere else.
Yeah, no,
it's pretty garbage.
And I was
on
gonna
Freya too. You need one on Freya, but sorry, go ahead.
Oh yeah, I was just gonna say I was gonna answer in chat, but since we brought it up, I'll go ahead and answer. Like, yes, most classes want lust on pull. I'm talking for fights that, like, you really need to save lust for certain times. Like XT to push hard mode, and stuff like that. Like the push by people maybe not even in the know. I don't know, but just the push to do it at a certain time just for the DKs.
Oh, yeah.
Also, on top of that, if DKs are that, like, the problem is they just should have done this before. But like, DKs in Nax got fed so much gear, you know, and like it feels bad. You know, a lot of people say that they don't stack DKs most guilds. They have 3 to 4. Yeah, but those 3 to 4 get hooked the fuck up. Like,
and a lot of people do are running, like, you know, for those instances, you know, it does feel bad when you're running 14, 15, 16, because most of what they're doing, it doesn't need that much gear, right? Like, it really doesn't need that much gear to do what they're doing. It's like slot machine stuff, it's procs. And a lot of people pointed out, okay, well, then most of this is because of gloves and lust and you know, sort of procs, and so those things don't change, and troll racial, and so those things don't change throughout the expansion, and so they're pushing back on, does this actually get strong? I don't think it's that strong in Ulduar. Just flat out, I don't think it's that strong in Ulduar. It could be good on like Algalon cheese, ultimately to just like reduce the number of cooldowns that you need, which was pretty important comp wise, but the difficulty of getting fucking, you know, 10 Death Knights together that are decently geared is a problem in and of itself. So I question that. Of all the things that I question that specific line. That being said, I'm not familiar with TOGC and I'm not familiar with ICC. I do not know what they look like, and it could be ridiculous there because the stats on that gear are fucking, it's ludicrous. It's ludicrous beyond belief, the stats on that gear. So I don't know what happens. I don't know anything about that nonsense. I have no fucking clue. But Unholy Death Knights were good in ICC, I recall, on private servers, even with their gargoyles capped on haste, which means it's a bigger nerf than they currently have. They were capped hard, like below what they are currently at, pretty much minimum, which means that they are pretty fucking strong there if they were even weaker than they are now, and they were one of the top contenders. So
okay, I just posted it in chat and in our Discord chat, but a friend of the show, Table Slam, made up a chart with as much information from old logs that he could find of ICC damage. And you'll see on most of the lists, Unholy is middle of the pack or pretty or like low, you know, but basically middle of the pack on most stuff. So it's kind of interesting. Like it's just on
There's a lot
3
of
fights
Fury up there.
Fury Fury and Fire are both ludicrous. I think Fire will be even stronger than it looks.
Yep. And Fire will get there at, you know, who knows now with the buff and gear, like Combat and Fire shoot up in Ulduar.
I don't see how Arcane is this bad though.
And what's crazy
Arcane,
is
I don't
look
think
at
Arcane is going to
Feral.
be this bad. I think people didn't run Encanters. I don't think is Feral good. Oh, Feral is actually not fucking bad,
dude. Okay, so when I played back in the day, they sucked in Nax. This is on real, actual vanilla Wrath servers. Old data from that, and Feral jumped up in Ulduar strictly because once they hit like 350, 400 armor pen, then they stack everything armor pen, and it becomes just like Combat, their best stat. And it's weird because like if you do it prior to that, it is not a jump.
Yeah, it's because of the ARP scaling that I believe. I don't know if they changed this in Kata, but obviously ARP scaling just nullifies. It's not like a damage boost. It literally nullifies armor, right? And so the first few thousand armor are the most important armor, right? Like if you have like 800 armor, it's gonna give you like an 8% damage reduction, and then you get like 2,000 armor, it's like 3% more or something. So it's the first bits are the most important bits. So it gets better and better and better. And then it gets really, really good, but not as good after you hit below 0%. But it starts getting slower and slower. So it's really weird. It has this curve where it has its own built-in like soft cap because it gets better as you approach 0 armor, and then it allows you to go into the negative armor, from what I remember.
Yep, which you get nothing
worse
for.
And worse.
Yep.
No, you get something for it. In TBC you don't. But here, I believe with the changes that they made from the TBC, because at the end of TBC they changed armor pen. It was ignores armor. Now it's armor pen, and it does work beyond 0. From what I recall, at least that was what all the warriors were doing. They were going beyond 0, not much beyond 0, but it still did help beyond 0 for the first few percent afterwards, as I recall. I could be wrong on that. I didn't play a lot of ARP classes back then. Every physical scales were skill way harder than they do. They do. Warriors are insane. Like I think TOGC on, they might even be really good in with like the buffed 10-man trinket, the Mjolnir's runestone. That might, catapult them forward. I'm not 100% sure. I'm no warrior main. I don't know.
Yeah, and both Combat and Feral really want that trinket too. Like it was so hard to like explain to my guild, listen, I don't need Grim Toll. until I get like some
Yeah.
Ulduar gear. And it's so hard to explain. Like, it does become my most important stat. So just please remember that when we're getting into Ulduar, that I won armor pen and the assassination rogues don't. It's very different gearing, you know?
Yep.
It's like, yeah, hunters, man.
All right. Well, okay. I want to get to North's interview. So we're gonna move on to the next piece. This is just kind of to let you guys know, but we can talk about it for a second, see what you think. But in the past, the achievements for Naxx were all removed, and you weren't able to get the title or the mount back in the day. They are going to leave those in, and as far as we understand right now, there's no gear stipulation. For me, I kind of wish they at least removed the Immortal and Undying titles, left the Drake maybe, or they put in the thing where you had to do it just like, you know, the achievement in Ulduar, where you have to do it with gear from that tier. It just kind of, it's going to kind of feel bad with everybody having Immortal. It's like, well, this was cool for like 2 months, you know? But
yeah. Because my understanding of this was back in original Wrath of the Lich King, they had these all went away when Ulduar came out. And then during Ulduar, they got so much pushback about removing them that they leave in the Ulduar achievements throughout the rest of the expansion, and they do that with the rest of the raid specific achievements, the 25-man achievements for the rest of the expansion.
They did leave in the 25-man achievements back in the day for Naxx as well, with the only thing that they removed, and this was until I believe Kata, when all of them were removed because it was no longer possible to get it. They removed the Immortal and the Undying.
Yeah,
it's no longer possible to get the Immortal and the Undying, but the achievement itself, if you have the Immortal and the Undying, you can go get the other things. You can get the Drake.
Really?
My understanding is not the same as yours. My understanding was not the pushback that they got. My understanding was they thought that it was toxic. They thought that it was dumb, that you couldn't get it later on, and that it hinged on an achievement that involved no deaths, because that was the first time they tried that. And from Ulduar on, it wasn't, okay, we removed this. They designed Ulduar, and this was from the rip, as I understand. The Conqueror of Ulduar, or whatever, whatever title is granted by doing the Immortal in Ulduar, is its own achievement, not linked to the meta. And it's never been linked to the meta because they thought it was an interesting thing, but people's obsession with it to get them out, they disliked. And I see no reason for them not to make this change for that exact reason. The reasoning is the same. I've spoke to a friend on this. He actually got it back in the day. And so I was talking to him about it. I congratulated him. I saw on Twitter when he got it. And he was like, well, I got it back in the day. I don't really care about it. And I was like, oh, I didn't know you got it back in the day. He was like, yeah. And I also thought it was kind of, I thought it was kind of a little strange the way that I went about, because X, Y, and Z reason, which I think is largely predicated on the fact that it does not seem like a very, like, I don't know how it interacts with you and your guilds, but a death can occur for any random number of reasons. There's a lot of RNG mechanics, stuff that is beyond your control. Ultimately, you get MC'd on KT, and then you get void zoned, and as the MC wears off, you get void zoned, you die. Right? And now your entire raid feels awful about that. Someone got MC'd and they were shadow bolting me. I called up, they were shadow bolting me. I didn't have dispersion of my shadow priest. I got frost bolted I got frost tombed the same moment that the shadow bolt hit me. And I got one shot, and it lost our Immortal run, right? And people want this for the achieve. They're fixated on it. I think that ultimately removing that anxiety is probably good for the game. Yeah, I think they should have. I think they should have announced that from the rip, though. I think if they were going to do it, they should have considered it before and done it from the rip and said that, because a lot of guilds now have already done the anxiety thing, which feels bad to have suffered for it, and now you don't even get the cool thing for suffering. That feels a little.
It feels a little.
I don't know how I feel about that. I don't know how I feel about that.
I feel like about that. They could have fixed it with just making it a gear stipulation on it, but I do feel kind of like a dick though, because I've tried it twice and done it twice, you know, and like I haven't failed whenever we've tried for it once. Like, but I play a very different way. Like, I don't play to parse when we do the Immortal runs, and that kind of feels bad too. Like, if I knew it was going to be in there, maybe I would have just been like, well, we don't have to like just waste a week of parsing here now. Like, you know, because I play to the limit unless you know, unless we're trying not to die. I mean, I'm always trying not to die, but like I push it, you know, to as far as it could go. And sometimes I go a little too close to the sun. I don't know.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I think that ultimately for me, the thing that I dislike about it is it creates this sense of discord within groups themselves, because a lot of people, they aren't going to care about those things. They aren't going to care about the mounts. And then it requires them to play really, really safe. And if any mistake occurs, it's not, okay, well, we have to do shocking once. All right. Okay. It's a discrete thing. Right. If anyone makes any single kind of mistake, then it's just over. Right. So it's something that then you have to sacrifice how you want to play for weeks and weeks and weeks and weeks. Whereas like, if you really want a title, it's not that big of a deal, but there's a legitimate advantage to this mount. It's a faster mount than other mounts as well. Like it's also just skin.
It's the only 25-man raid achievement mount that's 310, right? Like the Ulduar one
is also 310. The Ulduar one.
Oh, the Ulduar one is, but the ICC one is.
I do not recall the ICC one. I remember looking up a few days ago whether or not it was 310, and I saw that on the wowhead.com Wrath thing, the speeds are 310 and the 100 on the reins of the Ironbound proto trick. Yes.
Yeah, and the 10-man's 310 also, because what sucks is I got the 10-man early. I got every achievement for the 25-man early, but then had to wait forever to get the stupid Sartharion one.
Yep.
Like
is such a silly one.
They
like,
finally just let me
cheesed.
die. Like, yeah, I just had to die at the start, so I got it.
Yeah,
and then my tank gets it like the third time he takes Sarth. Like it's just like, so
I feel like
RG.
that's part of why. Because to lean into my raid leader hates achievements now. He hates raid achievements because he's been dealing with people like bickering about immortal runs, and then people getting super pissed off when we don't get like the Thaddeus charge one, or people getting, you know, all upset because they want to be able to suicide on Sarth for that. Like at this point,
it is a pain in the ass.
It's caused him more
stress. Everyone to have the Sarth achieve, you have to do a lower form of it, and you have to Zerg it together on like one Drake or zero Drake, and then you have to sacrifice. It's a whole fucking thing where it's like I said before, the competing interests, and when you have the competing interests be no one ever dying. It's a little
on every single boss in one raid ID.
Well, and then I even feel more bad because like we have like we could let 5 die and only give up the mount because we can still do 2 Drake. But I know there's a ton of guilds that cannot do that, right?
Yeah.
And so that part I feel bad for other people, but you know. Yeah,
well, it's our guild, we can't do it, and it's not because we can't let 5 people die on 2 Drake. It's because we split. We do like 10-man OS. We do 10-man OS 2 Drakes. I cannot let anyone die on its 10-man OS 2 Drake. That's like a 15-minute fight.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
You are not getting out scot-free in a fucking, you know, with any deaths on a 15-minute Sarth fight. And so, yeah, no, it feels really bad because then we are forced to make the decision again and again. It's like, okay, well, if someone wants to achieve, we tell them to go to a pug. It's like, hey, go to a pug, right?
Go to a pug, accidentally die.
Go to a pug or have another character and then just die. Like, that's fine.
Yeah. I'm not bent out of shape about it, but it's just kind of a bummer that, you know, there's not the stipulation or something.
That it wasn't at the beginning. I think it's bad that it wasn't at the beginning, and then they're taking a stance against it, which I'm fine with. But the fact that it wasn't that way from the rip, I will agree. It does feel bad. Yeah,
I would have rather had more chances to secure more 99s and then got undying or immortal later. Like I would have rather parsed during the actual phase and then, you know, thrown a group together for everybody to get the achievement after. And I would have done that had I known, you know, I think a lot of people would have. And so that's definitely the part that feels bad, but you know what, whatever. All right. So the last thing, just real quick to let everybody know, if you transfer to a new server, there will be 10 days before you will be eligible to get any realm firsts. So
Oh, that's true. Yeah.
yeah, so I don't even know.
So go soon.
Yeah, I don't even like if it comes out.
You can go if you were to go at the time of the airing of this podcast. I believe usually raids come out at 6-7 p.m. It's gonna take more than an hour to clear Ulduar, guaranteed to get Death Demise because you have to do hard mode of every single one.
We don't even know if Ulduar's coming out on the 19th, right?
Do we not know that? Do we not know that?
I mean, I feel like it is, but like they still haven't like confirmed it, you know.
I imagine they haven't because like there could be a catastrophic thing that they can't fix. For instance, catastrophic thing that is currently on the table. If you pull hard mode Flame Leviathan and you wipe, there is a chance that your entire lockout is perma-bricked.
Oh shit.
Yeah, that's not good. That's real bad.
That would be really bad.
It's not good. Doesn't even do on soft reset. Soft reset does jack shit. It's just bugged the entire time. You can't get in, right? You can't get in. And so it's like, am I doing hard mode Flame Leviathan day one? You bet your ass I'm not, because I'm not fucking sacking the entire race in the front. Well, although, you know, we could bug on that and I could just watch the race. So, you know, there's a push and pull there, but no, obviously that's a big fucking deal, right? And like, there's a lot of things like Yogg is still pretty bugged. So like there's stuff that they need to sort out. Yeah. And if they can't sort it out by then, I imagine it won't, but I'm pretty sure given Joy's Journeys is ending on the 16th, that seems the day that they would release the patch. And then
it does
release on the 19th, which means that you would have to transfer right now. Like go transfer right now.
Yep.
If you really want it, but realistically it's too late. But also you probably have a few hours or even like a week. Say you transfer to a random dead server. Are they gonna get Death's Demise week 1? Maybe not. Right?
True.
Probably not. If it's a server with like 5 raiding guilds, 10 raiding guilds, right? Like there are dead servers out there. And like never mind Algalon, right? Like Algalon is likely not going to die week 1 on a lot of servers. Like a lot of the little ones.
Yeah. Because there's going to be a handful of guilds even on the mega, even on like Faralina in part
because of the time requirement. If there were no time requirement, sure, right? And like people are generally speaking, like I know that we're gonna do at 10-man hard mode splits before we even attempt Algalon because you have an hour.
Yep.
And gear is very good on that fight. So.
Yep. All right.
Yeah.
Well, just letting everybody know. There's your warning. All right. Well, let's move into.
Bobby, we need to have a talk about this World of Warcraft Classic. Do I look like I know what a WoW token is?
All right. In this week's discussion, like we do with any new guest on the show, we're going to get to know him a little bit. And Duranosaur, feel free to jump in at any time if you have any follow-up questions you want to throw in. Or if you just want to troll North a little bit, that's cool too.
Yeah.
All right, North. What is your WoW background? Like, when did you start playing retail? Did you play it all the way through? Like,
so I started playing. Am I 26? I think I'm 26. I'm 26. I started playing when I was.
You're a baby. Oh my gosh.
I started playing when I was 8 years old, or 9 years old. It's like I think it was my 9th birthday, which is a few months after World of Warcraft came out. I am a vanilla child. I learned to read playing EverQuest 2 and World of Warcraft.
And learned to probably type too, huh?
Yep, 100%. And Western typing is still fried as hell. I had to like unlearn, typing with one hand while I'm playing the game.
Looking at the keys, I still type weird because of Ultima Online, which was my early game.
Very nice. But I played my character. I dislike that people change their name throughout their tenure. I really dislike that. I have been North since for time immemorial, because when I first started playing EverQuest 2 and Dark Age of Camelot, when I was 8.
DAOC. I played that too.
When I first started playing, I played with a family friend, like my dad's best friend, his family lived close to us, and we would go over and we'd have LAN parties. And their daughter I had a crush on her, even though I was like 8. I had a crush on her, and she named her character South, and I was like, here's my opportunity to go in. Like she's gonna think I'm so fucking cool if I name my character North. And so I did. And it's been that way for the entire time. I had to name it Northy on the server that I was on like Bailgun or whatever when I started. But yeah, I rated
North. If it makes you feel better, the reason my name's spelled the way it is because I picked it out before I knew how to spell the word blazon.
Based. But I like having the same. I don't like when people change their names. Anyway, that evolved into so I kept playing throughout. Like I didn't play a lot in EverQuest 2 and DAOC ultimately because we moved on to WoW, and I got to 60 in vanilla still. I remember I was in Stranglethorn Vale, the patch when they introduced raid markers. I remember that very vividly. I remember like being in Stranglethorn Vale and dicking around with my brother. Some older, I believe it was an older man. It might have been a teenage boy, I'm not sure, thought that I was a girl because my character's name was Northy and I was a female gnome rogue, paid for my first mount, asked me if my carpets match my drapes, and I was like, well, I'd be an organized girl in this situation, so I said yes. I had no clue what that meant. I'd asked my dad. No clue what was going on. Got to 60, went into Molten Core, died, behind Golemag, to the, to people telling me that you could see Rag if you looked through, all that. Started raiding a little more in TBC. I let my brother have my account for a while, and he gave me a terrible reputation in the server, and they introduced name changes, and so I changed my name from that to like some weird thing, and then eventually I changed it back like pretty fast, just to like try and get into a new guild because I was like blacklisted because apparently he like ninja'd a bunch of shit or something. I don't know. And then I started actually raiding like hardcore in I like do like a little arena and stuff, but then I started playing hardcore in Wrath, and like I remember a guy logged on my account to help me with something. He was like, dude, what are your keybinds? And I was like, well, what do you mean? They're just my keybinds. And he was like, dude, number 7 on your keyboard is engineering, like why? And I was like, oh well, I got it in that order. Like I had attack was 1, Sinister Strike was 2, Eviscerate was 3.
A lot of people do that.
Like it was just all the old binds, like stealth was like 5 or whatever, and it just was that way. Because I just like dragged them down, and I got engineering, so I put it on 7, which was a decent keybind back then. It's not a good keybind now. Like I don't know, like I use it for my mount now, but started actually trying to get good. Played with the Guild Rage. We did some good stuff in Wrath, but not really all that much. Eventually, we got good in Kata. Started like really pushing for server first. Got server first like all throughout Kata for the first 2 patches, and then I had to focus on. It wasn't even, I knew that I had to quit, like as Dragon Soul was coming out, and I was up for the Legendary Daggers, and I didn't show up to a raid, and I told my raid leader like a couple hours before, I was like, oh, this girl, because I think I was like a freshman I think it was a freshman in high school, this girl asked me to go to the movies with her, and I had a crush on her, and so I was like, oh, of course, Susie, I'll come. And I told my raid leader, I was like, oh, like I'm taking this girl to the movies, and he was like, I always knew you were gonna quit, like, because I took a little break in between Wrath and Kata, and he kicked me on the spot, and so I stopped playing. Until like I played intermittently through MOP and a little bit in WAD for like a tier or 2, like on random breaks. But then I came back to Classic when I believe it was my sophomore year. I heard Nostalrius had shut down sophomore year in college, and it was near finals, and Chronos 2 was launching, and so I sacked up and I did that, and thank God it was DDoSed and crashed and was offline for 2 weeks because I would have failed all my finals.
Oh yeah, definitely.
Because I could not put it down. It was amazing, and I did not remember and I picked Mage, and I was like, oh my God, yes. I was like, cool. Like I won't play Rogue because I don't have Cloak of Shadows and all that, and I really started playing Rogue when I had Cloak, so I don't want to play Rogue without all of these cooldown resets and like Cloak of Shadows and Shadow Step. I don't want to play without that. I'm going to play Mage because Mage has Blink. It seems cool, and I played it and I loved it. Loved every moment of it. Met a bunch of people that I still play with on Chronos 2, or play with, or in the same circles of. Then rolled on like private server after private server. Played Lock in between because I was like, oh well, I love Mage and Lock seems really powerful. Let me try Lock. Hated it. Awful. Terrible. Not fun. No Blink. How do you play the game? No Ice Block. How do you play the game? Literally impossible. Not fun. Boring. Boo.
Fear.
Fuck Fear.
Yeah,
People just press what if. I play a gnome. People just press what if. I don't give a fuck about fear. It's a useless ability.
oh, fear would kill us so much in vanilla, in dungeons. You just could not tell people like, don't fear here. Don't fear. That feared.
Yeah. So ultimately, yeah. So I kept playing on private servers, and then I streamed a lot. I started streaming. I got like a job because I studied biology. I got a job in pharma. In like pharma marketing in-house at a firm called Alnylam. And I hated it. It was awful. But I was really depressed. Bipolar sort of esque symptoms run in my family a lot. No one's expressly diagnosed all that often because my family has a weird aversion to therapy and psychiatrists. But I started having some mental health problems, mostly, just like depression. And just general issues like coping well towards the end of college. I was really stressed at the time, and I wasn't finding anything fun. Everything was just awful and gray and boring and sad. And this was even while I was playing, and then like I had these little blips on break where I would be playing vanilla and just kind of vegging out and just like grinding like a maniac, and then I'd get off a break and I'd focus on my schoolwork again. And then I started streaming and when Northdale launched, because I figured it would be fun. I didn't watch that many streams. I watched some League of Legends streams, like LCS and stuff, and I was like, oh, this might be fun, and it was fun. And I started playing for a while, got decently popular on private servers, had a ton of fun streaming, and then realized I kind of wanted to pivot away from that after a few months in Classic because the game was less and less focused on the world, and I wanted to try and start to try and become a game dev myself. And so I've been working on my own game for the past month and a half now. I'm trying to just get a lot of applications out, and I almost managed to get a pretty good offer, and then I was not able to finish out of the final round interview, which sucked. But that would have skipped some steps, so I'm applying to just general software stuff to see if I can get some normal QA experience under my belt, and do the not step skipping route. So yeah, that's
gotcha. Well,
that's my history with WoW.
Yeah, so coming back to Classic was just a no-brainer because you were playing a bunch of private servers, basically what you're saying, right?
Oh, we were looking forward. Like it got announced while we were the whole time we were like, oh, it'd be so nice if they had an official thing, yada yada yada. We loved the fresh, and it was several servers. It was like 3 in a row that I played like while I was in school. It was Kronos 2, it was Elysium that turned into Lightbringer, and then it was Northdale. So back to back. And they were all fun as sin. I love vanilla. It's amazing. But I stepped away from streaming when I realized a couple things. Classic was not the game that I wanted to pour my life into when the world aspects were diminished after phase 2. People got real raid loggy, real summony after phase 2 of Classic.
Oh yeah.
Ended like phase 3 and beyond. Even phase 3 was like fine, but like especially as you progress after that, a lot of content was AoE farming. It was really passive stuff, and I didn't enjoy that. I'll be honest, it wasn't my cup of tea. And so I figured I'd only do the stuff that I enjoyed. And if you're streaming, and if you're not streaming all the time, and you want to make it a legitimate, you have to just be, you always have to be on. It's the rat race of streaming and I thought it would be very different because I was in I was working as in pharma marketing. And I was like, oh, rat race, but like streaming, it's creative. It's what you enjoy. Like it's not a rat, and it is a rat race. It's a different kind of rat race. It's an interesting rat race, but I didn't love streaming enough. Well, it wasn't that I didn't love streaming enough. It's that I didn't love the games that I was playing enough to do it as often as I wanted to do it.
There's also, I'm sure you ran into this. If you want the streaming thing to work, you have to do a lot more outside of just streaming. For sure.
And all the other stuff that comes with it. I'm not a video editor. I'm not a Twitter marketer. Right? Like I'm a lot of things, but I'm not those things. And so right, you do have to try. There's a lot involved in it. And some people are like, oh, it's not a real job. No, it's not a real job. It is so much more than a real job. It is
so much work.
Difficult. It is an insane amount of work. And yeah, you trade those shackles for one that like requires a consistent routine for sure when you work a 9 to 5, but the 9 to 5 that you work is
It's stable.
It's always going to give you money. You're not putting in more than that. You don't have to put in more than that necessarily to see the growth that you want. And you're not always forced into these. And sometimes you are, but you're not always forced into the same sort of more that streamers are. And you're not always on camera. You're not overexposed. It can be stressful in ways that I think some people don't realize, and that was a little too much for me at the time, especially because I was, I hadn't really dealt with the problems that I've been experiencing, as a young man who, didn't really know what my lot in life was, who was, like had some deficiencies in my head and, didn't exercise enough, didn't walk enough, didn't eat right, didn't, look at the sun, didn't tan my balls, like you gotta be doing the shit that make your monkey brain work, or else you're just gonna, at least for me, I fell apart not doing the things that I didn't know that were all that mandatory, because, I was a kid for so long, and, you can kind of get by on no sleep and, just eating junk all the time. And I think that caught up to me in a really big way, and I had to figure that out.
Well, you're a lot more centered than I was at 26. Like I find it funny, so don't take this wrong, but like when I first heard you on Countdown to Classic, you rubbed me the wrong way, but like I didn't get mad at it because it reminded me so much of me in my mid-20s, right?
Yeah.
But I've seen you grow so much that you've now become one of my favorite opinions to listen to, and like, I mean, it's crazy. Like, so I don't know what you've been doing, but I definitely on the outside, just hearing you on Countdown to Classic, I think you have made major strides that I didn't make until my early 30s, probably.
I appreciate that. It took me, I think it took me a lot of serious looks in the mirror at who I was and who I wanted to be, and the ways in which that I, for a very long time, I think people do this when they're young. I think when they're very young, they think, okay, well, this is right, and I think that this is right and this is good, and my opinion is X thing, and if someone cares about the delivery of it or anything other than the content of it, for me it was always centralized around the thing. It was like, if people care, if people are smart enough or X enough or Y trait enough, they'll listen, which is never true. It's never true. Plenty of very, very intelligent people will not have tolerance for people being straight up assholes to them. And I was capable enough to see things relatively lucidly, and young enough to think that was all that mattered for a very long time. And you hear people tell you that that's not all that matters, and it's a really, really hard thing to realize. And I don't think that it's a thing that just comes with age. I think that it can come with age, and I think that it will, but I think it takes a lot of serious sort of epiphany moments where you're like, listen, am I getting what I want out of the people around me?
Yeah.
Am I getting what I want? Am I being the person I want to be? Am I getting the reception that I want? Is this for whatever reason, is this who I want to be? And why is that? And I think it's a really hard thing to do, because I think a lot of times when you ask those questions, you end up a little disappointed.
Well, we're definitely getting deep, but like, it's crazy because I don't think it comes with age. Like for me specifically, I always felt that the way I talked to people was completely fine, because I would be okay if they talked to me the same way. But I had to learn, through help of my wife, now was my girlfriend at the time, and my brother, they were able to point out and took the time to point out, dude, you're doing this and this makes others feel this, and they're not like you. And like, it took a long time and a lot of like really trying to go over what I had done different times to really be like, oh, it doesn't matter what my intention is or what my meaning is. It's just the only thing that matters at the end of the day is how they took it.
Exactly, because they're the person experiencing. They're not invalid for the ways that they feel just because you think a certain way and act a certain way. They have a right to that. And I think that ultimately I had a really hard time. I think a lot of people have a really hard time understanding that. And I think the culprit, to be perfectly fucking honest, is the fact that we were taught from a very young age. And I think that this is to a very large detriment, that you should treat other people the way that you want to be treated. And that is a fucking crock of shit if you are not a very normal person, because I have very specific requirements for what I view as love and care and respect. And they are very particular, right? They are very particular. And I have for a very long time, and you'll have seen this on Classic, I had a very hard time personally letting go of when, like, I had to be heard. If I had a thought, I had to share it. I needed to share it. And that was damaging all of my relationships because I couldn't keep my own fucking thoughts to myself. And I would want other people to share their thoughts with me. And so I thought, of course I have to share these thoughts. Of course I have to tell them what I think. They want everything that I think out of me because I want everything that people think out of them. And I realized, and it took me, it was a kind of a duh fucking situation where I was like, hey, not everyone wants to hear every fucking thought that I have, right? Like, and I don't know why that took me so fucking long. It took me forever. It took me, it taken me, 2 decades to realize that. But
you seem like a guy that has a very high IQ, and I've seen it over my life. I've seen a lot of people with, once you get over like the 130s area, like, you're getting to a point where you get frustrated with anybody who can't learn as quick as you, and you don't understand why they can't, and like,
you judge them for it. You judge them for not understanding in the ways that you understand,
which is not fair.
Not at all, because not everyone, and that applies for not just people who are smart, but people who are capable in different areas. I think that, like, a lot of people are good at a lot of random different things and trying to be understanding. I think that ultimately gamers, what they'll do is when they're good at something, be like, oh, well, this person's shit, right? Like, this person's shit because they can't do Y and I can't do Z. And I think that it has been helpful for me in this framing. And a lot of where I've done my maturing, it's when I was like not forced into, but took on more guild leadership activities and roles, and realizing that how I needed to approach different people needed to be a lot more human. And obviously this is not like revolutionary or anything, right? Obviously, you need to be good to people. You need to respect them. You need to meet them where they are. I think that's a normal thing to think, and it helped me with it. But ultimately, it was
See, I don't know that you're right. I don't know that everybody does know that. I think a lot of people,
I think that they've heard it though. They've heard it, and it's not some revolutionary thought in their head. They might not implement it. They might not act on it. They might not live with it.
Or they just don't talk. They just internalize it and don't, they're not vocal like you or I wouldn't be, but that's what they think in their head, they I think it's something learned. I don't think it's something that we're born with, Like,
no, not at all. But I think a lot of people say it. I think it's given as advice very, very often, and I think that it's accurate. But it's it is impossible to, and it's you can't sit at the edge of the field of rye and prevent people from making those mistakes. And I didn't appreciate that because I came to these conclusions on my own in a lot of ways, but in other ways not. And then I, interact with other young men because on the internet, there are a lot of like 19, 20-year-olds that, are, the same as I was or similar in a lot of ways. And I see that and I try and steer them away from it. And then you realize, oh, well, it's not that the old generations, it's not that the people who came before me, it's not that the mentors and the teachers and the people that I had were bad at this. It's that it's near impossible to explain the essence of how to live and how to be a good fucking person. It's why there are, thousands of years of writings on this, because it's really, really hard to try and explain. It's near impossible. And people have to know it for themselves. People have to live it and see it and breathe. Oh, this is how I can be at harmony with the things around me. And I'm embarrassed as how long it took me. I'm embarrassed that it took me so long because I think myself so capable. But
if it's not pointed out to you, like it takes, injuring relationships and stuff, to open eyes. But Doris, you were going to say something?
Oh, man. I think that I lost it in the moment because you guys are moving through this really well. I think the greatest like irony, right, is being someone that's like so confident in yourself and the way that you share yourself with the world. and then having to go through the reality that the way that you do that does not mesh well, right? Like, because I think I've also gone through this similar thing that you guys are talking about, and having those experiences where people thank God there's people out there that are willing to stop you and say like, hey, you rub me the wrong way, or you're the way that you act and the way that you say things, like it's taken in a way that you might not think that it is. And
I still do it to this day. Like, it isn't just a thing that I fixed, you know?
No, but it's an ongoing, it's a constant iterative process. But I think that also we're taught in a lot of ways, especially with like the celebrity culture that we have, and in being, right, like we're involved with streaming, right? A lot of people were like, well, you have to shut out the naysayers, and that applies to way that you begin to apply that to way more. It's like, oh, well, they just can't stomach the way that I give feedback. They can't handle it. They're not X enough, Y enough, Z enough to do X or Y or Z thing that I can. And I think that it becomes incredibly, toxic, but I think that we're taught that. I think that we really are taught that it's like, hey, you have to, like you can just do you. And a lot of these people are venerated. These people who are, like in a movie like a movie that everyone loves, I think a lot of people love, Whiplash, right? Like with the drummer. I don't know if you guys have seen it. Hopefully you've seen it. It's a fantastic movie.
Oh yeah, it's
ultimately it's a phenomenal movie, but ultimately it is in a lot of ways celebratory of an extremely toxic relationship with excellence. And I think that we see that throughout society, where people who are neglect every area of their life other than what they are excellent at, they are celebrated, and then that bleeds into other stuff where it's like, hey, this man's a genius, so he cannot do wrong because he has done X and Y and Z thing, and these are amazing things, and they are. But you can still, you can look at both things. You can walk and chew the bubble gum. You can note that the guy is a fucking asshole, even if he's done great things. You can be good at something and still not be a good person. And I think that for a very long time, separating those things as a young man was very, very challenging for me.
Yeah, definitely. Well, so you talked about you started streaming in private servers, but
yes,
I saw you streaming recently.
Don't tell Blizzard.
Are you back to streaming, or are you coming back, or are you just doing it here and there?
Yeah, I'm doing it as I think that I stopped in part because I wasn't able to keep up with the stuff that I enjoyed, and there is some stuff that, so I'm feeling it out. I leveled a mage the other day. I was like live for like 7 days straight for 4-5 hours a day, just leveling up that mage. But now I don't have another mage to level up, and we've been doing PTR stuff, so I've been organizing that. I don't want it to interfere with what I'm doing, and so I've been working more on my game the past couple weeks. And so I haven't had as much time for it. So as the need arises to me, I think being a little less results oriented there too. Like, I don't mind if only a couple people show up. I can talk to myself. I as you can easily tell, I do adore the sound of my own voice. So I don't much mind if not that many people show up. And I think everyone says that when they're in that situation, and they have to. And I said that even when I didn't mean that. I think I do mean that now, but that took a very long time to realize that it wasn't something that I wanted, and so I didn't care about the numbers, because like the way with Twitch Partner and how it works as well, and the way that like you grow on Twitch, it's like you always want more and more, bigger, better, never lower, always up, always up, always up, and it's it is stressful, and I don't want to get sucked back into that. I don't want to do things for numbers. I want to do things that I enjoy. And if people want to come and enjoy them with me, like I did when my brother used to play Ratchet and Clank, and I used to sit and watch him, if they want to come watch with me on their second monitor, I think that's lovely. Right. So long as I'm down for it. But I don't want it to be what I do. I want it to be a thing that I do. Yeah. I want to make games. I don't want to just play them. I do want to keep playing them. I want to always play them, but I don't want it to be the thing that I have to do for money, because then I'm involved in, okay, well, how do I create these artificial situations in order to, to increase X or Y or Z, to get X or Y or Z? Then my bodily and financial security are caught up in the thing that is extremely volatile. And I think that is potentially a very dangerous thing. So I want to avoid that. Yeah.
It's a bad trap. Try to compare yourself to others when you stream. Like, luckily I don't, I'm in a good situation. I don't stream to make money, although I do try, I turned on, like they did the whole ad thing where you get, 55% of revenue. I tried it for 1 month. I did make a lot more, but it ruined so many episodes of live Warcraft reloaded that now I've turned it back off, and I just was like, I don't I care about it being a good time more. And I want people to come out, and the whole reason I do it is because I want to have a conversation with people while I play, WoW. And I don't want to do that playing other games. If I'm playing Overwatch, I don't stream that because I want to concentrate on the game. But WoW, lots of times I'm doing stuff that I could do something else, and rather than watch Netflix or YouTube, I'd love chat to teach me more about the game so I get better, which is crazy because chat's a cheat. But if you're going for it as your job, then it becomes a job, which
it becomes a job.
It becomes a job, and those are stressful and rough, and you're chasing a carrot, and no,
when your well-being is caught up in it, when things are that volatile, it's extremely difficult. And I have a lot of admiration for the people who can do it, and the people that succeed, and they are the people that can be online every day and do the things that they need to do every day. And that A, to me, is impressive, but B, they're built a little bit different. The people who, especially the mage streamers, when I quit streaming, it was because what were the mage streamers all doing? They were farming, and I would not let that become my. And I got good views. I was getting good views. I was getting 200-300 views.
Yeah. Isn't that the worst?
But it wasn't. I wouldn't do it. I would not ask that of myself.
Yep. Yeah. It's just dude, I'm gonna do lots of times when I stream during the day, I'm literally just talking and run around doing my dailies and really not doing anything crazy. But towards the end of TBC, when I would do GDKPs on all of my alts, a bunch more people would watch, but that's what I wanted to do at the time, so cool that they want to come and watch, but really it's my house, and be nice, be respectful to everybody, and I have no problem getting smaller if I ban you. If you're mean to someone in chat, or you're just overly mean to me. Now, if you're trolling me, I do kind of play around with those guys at times, but if you're really being mean and or rude, then I'm just dude, I don't care. It's not going to hurt. And I think streaming is great for that.
If you don't need it, it's a lot less toxic, and that's what I found as well. And that's a big difference maker for me.
I think it's pretty. Because I feel like I kind of had this epiphany in this last week or two, where it was I for so long, when Classic came out and I finally jumped into streaming and stuff, in my mind I was yo, if I can get big enough, if I can make this a real enough thing, then I can just I can in my free time do whatever I want, essentially, right? I can just play games all day. Not making the connection that because of going into lockdown with COVID and everything, and all that I have found a job that is very flexible with my time, that I get, I make enough money to support my habits and everything like this. And it's I can play games as much as I want right now, and have a real job that I can say that's a job. I'm going to go to that job. I'm going to get paid. That pay is going to cover my things. And then streaming doesn't have to become a job. So stop making it one. And that was an important thing for me to sit down and realize, just stop making streaming and content creation a job. It doesn't need to be.
And you probably feel better because of it, because you are covered, but then say you do have some luck pop in, that one episode where I got 250 gifted subs when Sarth and Wiki were on. I was what the heck? Yeah. That paid for a ton of Christmas presents, and it's just it was just, I got to spend more on Christmas because of it. And that was the cool part about doing the streaming, thinking of it as extra is really neat.
Oh man, and recently too, just I was like, why am I not sub to all these people that I watch and support? Like, and if I think for a while there was like, because then I'd have to sub to like 10 or 12 or 15 people, and I was like, I think my stream makes enough that I could just do that. And like, that's because I'm just getting a little bit of disposable income from the stream. Why not just like share that with the people that I'm watching and hanging out with? So there is that piece of it, right? Where it's like, it is cool to make a little bit of money here and there, but at the same time, like, God, I know that if I try to do this full time, it would be awful. And
only a few ever really get to do it, right?
Yeah. Someone had a really good analogy about like, this was like a random post I read somewhere on the internet. They were talking to their friend, and their friend was like, I think I might just like be like a full-time content creator, just on a whim. They were like, I think I might just like start making YouTube videos and stuff, because that seems like a fairly easy thing. And the person looked them dead in the eye and was like, could you ever imagine saying the same thing about music? Just saying like, hey, I think I'm gonna be one of the greatest rock and roll like guitar players of all time. No, you wouldn't. There's not people out there that are just on a whim like, oh, I'm going to be a rock star and make millions of dollars, because there's this established, like the music industry is so established that getting to that point does seem insurmountable, I think, to the average person right now. But because content creation and the internet and YouTube and Twitch are so young, so many people have this idea that like, oh, I could just jump into it and I'm great. I know I'm great. I'll just be famous. But it's now gotten to the point where there's such an influx of people that it's kind of like trying to be a rock and roll star out of nowhere. Like, it's just not going to happen for the vast majority of us. You could have great opinions,
you could have great ideas and stuff, but then if you don't edit right, if you don't edit correctly to keep people's attention on YouTube, if you're not super entertaining on Twitch. Yeah, I think if you're looking to get into YouTube or Twitch as a hobby, it's an awesome hobby, I think.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Especially if you're going to do things like this, where you get to hang out with people who you like talking to and who you respect. Like, this is the coolest thing about being in content creation for me right now, is that
it's the stuff that is natural. It's the stuff that is natural. It's like, I would rather, and that's why I came back streaming a little bit, because I was playing so much and I was like, it would only make it more fun. I would be doing this and I would be having the same, if not more fun, if I were doing it on stream. And you get to do these, you get to do these shows, you get to do really fun shit sometimes just by virtue of being in those communities. And so I wouldn't go back and be like, oh, well, I wouldn't go back and change what I did. I loved it. It was great. I would have changed my relationship to it maybe, but there's a lot of cool stuff. And if you only do the things that you love, or you are really good and you can really, you are really dedicated and you can put in all that time and you can edit your own stuff or get an editor and you have that kind of stuff available to you and you want to do it, obviously do it. It's cool. It's really dope. But I think that losing sight sometimes of the fact that a lot of people get into it because they think it's going to be fun, and then they do unfun shit in the course of it because they're like, well, anything to succeed, right? Well, I need to do the fun thing, so I need to, right? I think that it's worth maybe pulling that thread a little bit and being like, well, is this worth it to me? I think that question is a good one to ask. Ultimately.
Yep.
I think it's essential to ask.
Yep. Well,
to check in with yourself, right? To make sure it is
exactly.
And I think that's the way that you improve in life. I think that's the way that you get happy in life. I think that is, at least in my experience, right? Just my experience. It's you gotta keep tabs on yourself, right? And thank God if you have loved ones that can keep good tabs on you, but you're the best person for that almost always, right? Like, you need to feel what you love and what you enjoy, and really being able to know what that is and take a moment and feel and see what it is that you are enjoying or not enjoying about the things around you, I think is a really, really, really valuable skill that people don't, talk about that often.
Yep.
And to your point, go on walks, talk to yourself.
I'm going on one right after this.
Same,
with
actually.
the doggies.
After raid, I'm gonna do a midnight walk.
Yep.
So I got gear to steal,
Speaking of raid, these guys got to go. So I'm going to do a really quick.
Ladies and gentlemen, this is our add-on of the week.
Okay, so the add-on of the week this week is All the Things. And it's just what the name says. It's all the things. If you're in a zone and you haven't, there's a recipe there that you could use that you haven't gotten, it shows up. If there's an achievement, it shows up. Different quests. It's a really cool thing if you're an achievement hunter or just, looking to see what you didn't do, leveling up and don't know if there's a recipe you need to buy for your professions. It's just a really cool add-on. You guys use this?
I don't.
I'm not that much of a collector. I've heard of it. I'm not much of a collector.
I'm not a big add-on guy either.
I love add-ons. I try and minimize it. Like I'm very particular. I want the least amount possible that adds to my experience. I think it's a great add-on that it isn't that great or isn't that different, but I really like it. It's like Blizzard buffs or something. I forget what it's called. It's like something buffs. I don't know. I just got it. It lets my buffs be like skinned by the mask skin that I have, so it looks like all the other stuff on my UI. I really like when things are, when they match, when their
neat, tidy
design elements are sort of in line. That's probably from the graphic design and marketing days, but yeah. I really enjoy. I forget what it's called. God damn it! I should have realized what it was called before. It's called Blizz Buffs. It's called Blizz Buffs,
Buffs. Okay.
Yeah, it's. I'm pretty sure it literally is just an add-on that works with Mask, which Mask is an add-on to skin stuff. So like my weak auras all have the same borders, my buttons all have the same borders. All of them look pretty much the same, which I really like. I like the weak auras having the same border as the buttons, same border as the the method raid tool stuff, the same border as the buffs. I like it being
Gotcha.
neat and clean.
Yeah, don't look at my UI then.
We're doing UI reviews for people in the guild because we're trying to improve our lot from within, and a lot of times people have stuff that's cluttered and they can't see certain abilities. Maybe their keybinds are a little weird and they can't press certain things they need to press at the same time. Maybe their healthstone's on a weird keybind, stuff like that. And we're doing UI reviews, and it's funny because some people have beautiful setups and other people have what looks like whack-a-mole on like Molly plus a little bit of meth and just like all haphazardly washed down by 8 cans of Diet Mountain Dew. Like it is sometimes it's great, sometimes most of the time it's woof.
Yep. Well, yeah, mine's not horrible, but it's not the greatest, but it works for me, dang it. All right, well, we're gonna go ahead and close out the show. Don't forget to follow us on Twitter at WC Reloaded. You can follow the Mash Those Buttons at the Mash Network. You can send us your WoW stories at wcrpodcast@gmail.com. If you'd like to join the Mash Discord and interact with the host of this show or any of the hosts on the Mash Network, you can go to mash.gg/discord. How can you help the podcast? You can join our Patreon at Warcraft Reloaded. You can go to restedxp.com and use the code RELOADED for any guide that you want to get. You can leave us ratings and reviews on Spotify or on iTunes, and you could leave a comment and a like and a follow and a subscribe on the YouTube and help that kind of grow a little bit more. And yeah, that's how you help the podcast. Duranosaur, where can we find you?
Most often at twitch.tv/Duranosaur. I'm also Twitter, Duranosaur24, and then Duranosaur on other things like YouTube and stuff.
Awesome. And North, what about you?
Twitter.com/North The Mage, classic. Twitch.tv/North The Mage, YouTube.com/North The Mage. I haven't made a YouTube video in years, but hey, if you want to go see the old ones where I made Bistless guides and then stopped making Bistless guides because I realized that Bistless guides are toxic and that I shouldn't provide them because it removes an element of socialization in the game, then you can follow me on the other places where I talk about those things instead of on the place where I have the old guides that I stopped making. So,
well, there's probably still worth in the guides if you're still going to play vanilla or a new season of mastery, different things like that. So
hopefully they give us a little more changes though. Hopefully we can get a bit of a shakeup. There's not much point in going there unless you want to go watch the old State of Stalag recording. State of Stalag was
that was a good time.
I made a brief and meteoric entrance into podcasts, never to return. But maybe not never to return, but not to return recently in terms of my own projects. But that was fun. I miss Stalag. What a great server. Most people who still interact with me like my stream, they'll be like, oh, I know you from Stalag. Tons of people, like whenever they find me in game.
Oh yeah.
Niche internet micro celebrity status, they'll be like, North, is that North from Stalag? And I'll be like, yeah, buddy, let's go. Stalagmites together.
Especially on Faralina now. There's so many. It's fun. It's a good time.
It is.
Awesome.
It is.
And you can find me on Twitter at Blazin_Bob. That's BLAZZIN_BOB. You can find me streaming. I'm back to streaming. Be back just like tomorrow, the next day. Back from my break, ready to knock out the rest of the stuff and get into Ulduar and probably lose my main tank job as a warrior, but I'm going to try my hardest to not do that. So you can find that at Blazin' Bob. All right, guys, let's get out of here. Bye.
Bye.
Peace.
Thank you very much for checking out Warcraft Reloaded podcast. Make sure to like and subscribe and hit that bell so you don't miss any future content.